Show is back after a long hiatus, and I tell you, people said the Pig Show is retired. They said it's done, it's gone. There's not enough good people to talk to, but thankfully we have a very special show that's got me very excited. It's got a lot of the community excited right now, as we have a couple of the crew, a small piece of what is, I didn't realize, such a large crew of those guys over at Sunspear Games who are working on the new RTS game, Immortals of Pyre. Thank you guys for joining me on the show. I loved your show with Artosis, and I'm very happy I got you guys here.
Howdy.
Hey, thanks for having us on.
Howdy. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I think there's a lot of good games being developed right now, and you guys have got me very excited as well, especially because of the talent pool that you all come from. So not everybody has watched the Pylon Show episode with Artosis, where you guys had a 4-hour discussion that felt like, if you're an RTS fan, only went for about 2 hours, because it was actually just jam-packed with good, solid information about RTS design, about what you guys are trying to achieve with your game. For those who didn't get to watch that show, who are you guys? So what are you doing? And just give us a little bit of background, a bit of an overview for the uninitiated.
Who am I? My name is Dylan Kahn. I'm one of the co-founders of Sunspear Games. I'm at this point, I've been part of the modding scene for 8 years, usually in a tag-along capacity, and I do all of the writing for the characters and setting design of Immortal Gates of Pyre.
Hey guys, I'm Tom, also known as JaKaTaK, and in 2012 I moved across the country and decided that I would start a career making hotkeys for Starcraft 2. Which is not wise, and I suggest none of you go do that, but it worked out for me somehow. I managed to convince this handsome lad down here, Mr. Pig, to use the hotkey layout that Coulter and I developed. And yeah, so I'm in charge of hotkeys, I'm in charge of user experience, systems design, motivation, things like that, and I'm also running the community at this time, because it's a startup and we wear many, many hats.
Howdy, I'm Travis Toler, aka, if you know me from Team Liquid, I'll be December's column on there. I'm basically the lead gameplay designer, and I've had a big hand in the tech side of things as well. And I just came from modding for a very, very long time, since Brood War, since I was a wee lad. And then just did experiment after experiment. Most of my time doing modding and working with very, very serious like melee type gameplay was working on a project called Starbow for a very long time. With some very, very talented and amazing people there, where we built our own ladder that hooked up to the StarCraft 2 engine, got pros to play it, which kind of brought some of the mechanics and some of the good ideas that Brood War had, and then applied it to a game in the StarCraft 2 engine. Got to experiment with lots of units, lots of design, and then have been working with the Sunspear crew for a couple years now, doing our own projects and experiments, trying to see how much we can stretch the RTS, how much we can make more accessible without breaking the core fun factor of it. All sorts of insane stuff. So I'm just kind of like the main gameplay designer who's just, all right, we can stretch it this way, or if it gets too crazy, then it breaks, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Travis is a mad genius.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen a lot of Travis's strong opinions over the years on the Team Liquid forum, and I love. I was like, oh, as soon as I heard that you were part of the crew over there and stuff, and then watching the Pylon Show episode, I was like, all right, we get to see more of the face behind the Team Liquid passion there, and I mean that's such a big ancient RTS community that's had such a bunch of hardcore people on it. But I love the backstories that you guys have, and there's more people than just you three, but obviously I've just got, only so many people can talk at once in a show. But I mean, just bit by bit, right? Like JaKaTaK, obviously Tutorial Central, onboarding and trying to help people learn StarCraft. The staircase, I believe, was completely your conception as well, right, Jack?
Yep.
So, yeah, the core, the hotkeys, so basically you have come from an education background where you were very good at teaching people early on, and you developed different techniques and so on. But I mean, nowadays, You have Showtime, you have Probe, myself, a whole bunch of different GM players and streamers who all use different variations of the core, which is, as you said, the hotkeys you set up. You worked on the Starcraft reality show for a while. You were running the YouTube channel Tutorial Central. I mean, you've bounced around and done a whole bunch of different things. And I mean, this kind of ties in because, yes, some of that's just content, but a lot of it was education, onboarding people, teaching them how to play the game, making the game easier to play with Starcraft, right? But we also saw with kind of modding and stuff, and especially a lot of where Travis came from with Starbow, a lot of that kind of came from, would you say, infestors in Wings of Liberty and Broodlords, and then like Swarmhost stalemates in Heart of the Swarm?
Broodlord and Fester. Oh god, that's just the giant death ball of Zerg, and every faction had to have a death ball.
Mate, I won my only championships in my country during that meta. Don't hate on it. It's actually really funny because like I go back sometimes and think about my old like best games when I was coming up as a pro, and I was like, there's no way I would have had such a quick rise in skill from someone who is not a competitive RTS player at all if it wasn't for some of these broken mechanics, which is kind of great. But I think that fueled a lot of passion, right? Is that StarCraft was quite slow on certain things, right? Broodlord Infestor was a problematic composition for a long time. It really got worse and worse, and it took a year and a half or something like that for any changes to come in.
Months. Heart
of the Swarm, Swarm host meta, right? There was a few different times where things were moving very slowly, and I think we got to see a lot of people who'd played Brood War and seen what was great about that, as well as understanding its limitations, kind of be very motivated by the fact that, hey, this game's so good, StarCraft 2, but there are these missing details. And I feel like the work of the community and a lot of you guys who are now at Sunspear Games was pushing these areas forward in your own mods, in your own community discussions, talking about them, creating YouTube videos. And Blizzard kind of very slowly picked up little pieces of those much further down the line.
Integration of these mechanics, yeah.
We saw a tutorial come into the game finally when you first logged in, right? Like 6-7 years into the game or something like that.
It was the first time in StarCraft 2 that they taught you how to attack move.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh my
I
gosh!
remember being so happy when they put in like the move, like the turrets actually moving and tracking targets. And cool. I had always put that in myself in my mods for like just the longest time ever.
Yeah, the old Immortals and Siege tanks when you'd try to stutter step them, and every time you'd move command them away, the turret would turn back. So if you try to shoot, the turret would have to turn, shoot once. So it was just ineffective to micro a lot of different units because they weren't tracking correctly. There was no leash micro on carriers initially either, right? So you could only attack move.
I put that in as a proof of concept using just advanced scripting. And then, sometime down the line, they finally added it. I'm like, finally, now I don't have to like mod it in myself.
So this is what I guess I love is there's so many of these little pieces, whether it comes to onboarding players and teaching them the fundamentals of RTS, whether it's looking at the design of units to make them more interactive and satisfying and fun to play with. I love that you guys have a crew of people who have been at the cutting edge of trying to move those forward and working in different mods and getting tournaments going for like Starbow and that sort of stuff. And in the end, you guys have just spent many, many years testing out how to make people enjoy RTS more with a different game, right? Testing how to make sure that you can actually kind of get people not only onboarded, but also how do these mechanics work? How can we test things out? What can we make better? What can we make, just kick out of the game? What is something that's just an antiquated sort of thing that's still there? I believe a holy cow was the term that you guys were talking about a little bit with our
testing for low-level players was an experience where we needed to define gold-level players, we needed to define silver-level players, see what are some of the biggest sore spots that like we just ultra take it for granted whenever we're like, you just, retreat your workers away from harass, and then you send them back to the middle line. And then you watch a low-level player game, and they forget to do that last part, and they have like 20 workers just hanging out. They just automatically let them rebuild, or, they rebuild them, right? And they forget about those old workers. and then 10 minutes down the line, they're down 3K, and I'm like, this is how quite a bit of low-level play games have been won and lost. It's just people forgetting to bring back their workers from harass. I'm like, yeah, that seems a little bit, extreme in the range of how small a mistake it is versus how big the punishment is. Lots of things like that you just don't even think about as a high-level player.
So that I guess I've kind of jumped around a bit because I'm so excited by the passion and backstory that you guys bring. But give us a quick rundown, guys. So you guys have been working here on Immortals, and what is the game? If you had to sum it up quickly, and then we can go into a little bit more detail. And what's made you guys so passionate about this product? What do you guys want to bring with this game? What is the core message and difference that you think you can make to change this?
Who wants to go first?
I think Dylan should probably. I think he probably answered
All
this
right,
one a million
cool.
times.
I'm going to be a little flippant here, but after the pylon show, that shouldn't be any new news. The kind of phrase that we use is RTS without the BS, and this is basically just to focus on what are the core elements that when you ask someone what their favorite game is, if they're in our age group, there's 2 to 3 titles that usually show up, and they're usually Blizzard RTSs, or Command and Conquer, or Age of Empires. But RTS consistently has this huge venerable place in not only competitive games or esports, because Brood War basically founded that phenomenon, but it has just cast this huge shadow in the industry. So there's this beautiful legacy to this genre that basically has fallen out of favor. And I'm actually in the process of kind of writing out an article on this problem space. But people want to play RTS, and there are so many things that have modernized in the game industry in terms of how you design for an intuitive and fun player experience, or a more socially integrated player experience, that just haven't been adopted by developers, or developers have been slow or have struggled to integrate these sort of modern design philosophies and combine that with the magic that makes RTSs so damn fun and so damn cool. There's just an inherent spectacle to commanding a nation's military, and all the drama of a battle in real time and the matching of a mind versus a mind. It's the way I try to explain it to older folks who aren't necessarily literate in this stuff is imagine you're playing speed chess in real time, but you can only see what your pawns see. And so, it's the best elements of chess and the best elements of poker all going on at once. So taking that and democratizing that magical experience and giving it to players in a way that doesn't detract from the top 0.1%, but rather lets people actually aspire and get invested in that climb, is one of the key things that motivates me, at least.
That's awesome. I think it's something where it's a very interesting attitude, because what do people's minds go to? If we're not games designers and we go, I just like playing Starcraft, I like playing Age of Empires, I like playing Dawn of War, whatever games it was over the years. Okay, well, sometimes what makes those games fun for some people is the challenge, right? How dare you let me select multiple buildings in a game rather than Brood War, where you have to click each one? Or, yes, the pathing's buggy on Dragoons, and they're going to go run and get stuck in a cliff for a long time. But learning how to deal with that and master, that's part of where the satisfaction comes from. And, it's the Dark Souls sort of thing, where it's the difficulty and it's the getting punished that makes it so much more satisfying in the end. So do you think that is inherent to RTS, that it has to be somewhat punishing or you lose satisfaction? I mean, how do you, if someone says, look, that's part and parcel of the whole thing, how do you guys respond to that?
Well, I think
yeah, I can.
Yeah, Travis should take it.
Yep. So there's there's obviously just a sliding scale. You can infinitely just go towards any extreme, right? Where every game is just incredibly, band-aidy and rubber bandy, and then you're playing Mario Kart. you can go in the opposite extreme and make Brood War even harder, go down to like 6-unit selection, and you just deal with it, right? The trick is making sure is more about expression of skill and like ability to actually interact with objects and like make sure you can express yourself in that game. I think that's what really makes these competitive games where they're very real-time oriented, like Smash Brothers and Melee, Brood War, Starcraft 2, right? Is the amount of just fidelity and control you have in those games where you can express yourself. Where as the games get easier and easier and easier, it's more like you are playing a prescribed way that the game wants you to play, right? Due to just the mechanics only alone, right? Of the game design. So our goal is more about making sure that at the top level of play, there's still more and more expression that your opponent can do, which forces you to react. So it's less about you getting punished in like a PvE, you fighting against the game yourself scenario. Whenever I play against high level players, I'm playing against Serral and Vanguard mod, right, which is one of the biggest blueprints for Immortal in the Starcraft 2 engine. Like, okay, I'm playing against I'm just having a relaxed game against like mid-level players. Okay, I'm just hanging out and having fun. It's a chill game for me because I don't have to try that hard. And the macro, it can be more relaxed, right? But as soon as I'm playing against Serral, I've got my first game. I might do okay versus him, because I'm used to playing against pros and semi-pros at this point. But then as soon as he's on his second game, third game, there's zero shot. Like his multitasking completely outstretches me. Every single optimization of like his fighting is so much better in his micro, right? Everything just completely outstretches you and makes the game harder and harder and harder, right? Because you are playing against an opponent. And if you make sure that the game mechanics allow a player to multitask and actually stretch your opponent, you still get that depth of game where it feels like this game is so hard because you're playing at a high level. It's just going to be really, really hard. It's really hard to win and do well because you're getting slaughtered by people who are just better than you. So making sure that is maintained is the core part. It is one of the core goals of our game. If we don't have that, we've done something wrong, and we clearly need to add in more elements of opt-in complexity where the pros are able to express themselves more and more instead of being like, okay, this pro plays just too similar to this pro, and it's like luck of the draw, or it's not enough elements, right? The game isn't broad enough, right? That's the beautiful thing about Brood War, right? You could do so much to Brood War, right? You could make Brood War have automatic worker production, like all these smart systems that like an AI was paying half the game for you, and there's still be so much for every player to do. It is insane how much room there is to insert yourself into the game, and a game that complex and with just insane amounts to do at all points in time. Where in StarCraft 2, right, if macro was just simplified and that's all you did, StarCraft 2 would be a lot harder to see that divergence of skill, right? Because you'll see these hyper optimizations, and that will be the bigger things about what makes a player win or lose, and it'll be just more about the skill dimension.
You're talking about
poker,
pathfinding, right?
In StarCraft 2, right, because there's like less bases to take, and it depends on the meta, right? Like the current meta, Legacy of the Void has done so much to make sure that multitasking is awarded in microing things and having more dimensions of skill. Like StarCraft 2 has finally gotten to that point. They've done a lot better at that, right? But if you take a game where the meta is just it's too simplified, right? There's it rewards keeping just one big ball and that's it, and you don't expand too much, and you only have to protect so much area, right? Then it's harder to have a higher expression of skill and divergence of people. So that's one of the big goals and how we're trying to accomplish it.
Yeah, so this is so much to digest there, and to kind of reiterate for the listeners. I mean, this is great because this is why I love talking to you, Travis, because you've got such a knowledge of it. And to break that down into a little bit of points and reiterate it. So one of the key fundamental concepts at the core is allow the combat, the fighting, the map control to stretch out. So make sure there is multitasking and sort of a map control element And, you know, these chances for you to do lots of interaction over an extended period. So you can exert that skill and you can optimize lots of small things. And there's opportunities for lots of tactics and that sort of stuff. Is that a fair summary of kind of the first point of what you were saying?
Yep. And there's so many parts of gameplay that feed into that, right? Like how many bases you protect, how you protect them, right? Like for an example, StarCraft 2 has lots of open bases. Brood War has lots of bases that you can take and just secure with walls, and then there's more ways to siege that base, right? You can siege it slowly, or you can do harass, you can do air harass, right? And every way you defend it is a different route of defending it, right?
Yeah, and it's important. Yeah. So in StarCraft 2, and you were talking about how, you know, the meta can sometimes simplify, and this is always where, you know, as someone who's a big teacher of StarCraft, people always say, you know, this matchup, I just need to do this. And it's, man, these Void Rays, and I've got to do my Mass Queens and my Vipers. And I sit there and make my ball, and he sits there and makes his ball. And, you know, it can lead to this thing. And I always am a big kind of proponent of, you know, try however you can to break out of that meta, you know, if you're not enjoying it. But there are always, you know, most people tend in a certain direction. And there are always map design, balance design, how people are playing that tend to put people in a certain mode. Many of us lamented for years you know, you would get to 3 bases for a long time in Wings and Heart of the Swarm, and you would never need to take a 4th, and the bases would almost never mine out, and you could kind of get that 3rd Nexus up with your Nexus Overcharge, and just make Stalkers and Sentries and then max out with Colossus. And there was a lot of this kind of, you know, you don't have to do that much, whereas there's a very satisfying sort of game you can play where you're both doing multiple things and you're multitasking and there's more interaction and action. And, you know, I always think for me at the core, that is the most interesting part. And I think it's something where, you know, you've always got to learn to interact in strategy games, because that's where the joy comes from. And I think this is a big philosophy behind a lot of what you guys do, you know, just macro. You should just macro. You know, I rant about this all the time as people tell you that in StarCraft, and I go, yeah, if you never want to have fun, sure, go for it. Is it a fundamental base? Yes, learning how to build units, but you need to like learn a little bit and immediately start trying to learn how to interact with the opponent, or you're going to miss the fun for way too long. And you're going to be like, I spent 6 months training how to build things, because I have this idea of StarCraft being this elite game, and I want to be an elite gamer, and I played 100 AI maps before ever getting on the ladder, and now I'm ready, and I'm there, and I'm on the ladder, and I'm trying to max out, and I keep getting hit by things, and it's always my opponent comes and gets me with some, you know, some bullshit, basically, some BS, and I don't, you know, and I feel it's unfair, and I was, okay, you know, you've got to, you have to work hard in StarCraft, and kind of be led down the right track of, go first, go interact with the opponent, because if you don't, unfair things are going to happen to you and you're going to be very upset, and it's a very unrewarding experience. And it's like this whole thing where I'm constantly trying to teach people, like, go first, get out there, go do things, be active, because
you have to be told to do that is the sad part, right?
I have to
like,
preach it.
Play StarCraft 2.
Yeah, I'm a wild preacher on the street corner screaming this stuff, right? And I feel like I'm crazy, but there's no teaching of that automatically in the game, right? And instead, everyone tells you to do the opposite, which is just to build stuff. So, I mean, that's something you guys are trying to sidestep that entirely, right? And I think it's a real mental switch for me, because I go macro satisfying. Focus my macro, do some micro, focus on, you know, it's splitting my attention well. That's a skill I've spent years developing. It's, you know, oh, he's distracted here, I pull his attention there, and I do a move there. The thing is, you guys aren't wanting to remove that. You guys still want to pull his attention here, attack there, kite over here, distract him, get a counter attack in there, right? It's just, you want to remove the build an extra supply depot, build an extra worker, control group your units. Oh, your Terran, your units are at your rally. Let's try and grab those, awkwardly put them on control groups. You're trying to simplify the fighting the game, and to still make the game difficult and multitasking intensive, you're going to need to either increase the amount of interaction happening between the players, or simply because their time is freed up, do you expect players to simply be interacting more, because that's where you get advantages in Immortals?
We have a couple mechanics. Like it's twofold, right? Two main parts to this puzzle is, one is the how you interact with game. So that's all UX. We can jump into that when we get Tom into the fray. And then the second part is the game design, the supporting systems, right? So League of Legends, you have towers. You don't sit in your base in League of Legends. It wouldn't make sense to, right? You have towers, you have lanes, you have all these mechanisms that kind of guide you down the right path without someone ever needing to tell you to do it. So we have some starting towers that are kind of out in the map that gave you these initial pockets of vision, this initial pockets of protection. Those do wonders. I don't know the last time you saw a silver level player play, but they sit at home, they're scared to death, the entire map is covered in fog of war, and they just sit in their base and play SimCity for like the 10 minutes until they feel like, I guess I have an RB big enough to move out of the map. I'm not sure, but let's go. So having these supporting systems, where we have initial towers and we have neutral objectives that, you're encouraged to go out and kill for rewards, right? Those kind of get you out in the map. And before you know it, you're scouting, you're fighting for map control, you're playing out of the map, you're interacting, you're having more fun without ever needing to go through a tutorial. Obviously, tutorials are very important with games as complicated as an RTS, but these systems kind of trick you into a way that you're playing in a more fun and a more correct fashion for getting a good play out of an RTS.
Cool. So you're funneling people to learn as they go, right? It's just pick up the ball and throw it around, and you're designing it in a way where you want people to then organically almost get funneled into those correct areas. And it's so funny because anytime there's always, and I like to always come back to this because I think you guys have such good philosophy behind it. It's that hypercritical old man voice, like, no, you can't reinvent the wheel. We do RTS a certain way. Stop trying to change it. No, like, just reskill. It's like
flashback to the Automine rally and the MBS wars.
We don't want new players in the space. It's fine.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
Like, such a brilliant example is just like, if you ever played Age of Empires, low level players scout in that game because they start with a horse. Right, they start with a scout, and its only job is to run around. Like, it has no other job. You're like, well, I guess while I'm building up, I might as well move him around, I guess. And where do you move him around? You move him around on the map. So just starting with a scout unit is such a big little psychological trick that tricks you to play well. Where we have a starting scout unit that you start with at your main base, and let's okay, you're waiting for your first building to complete. Might as well go send them to the opposite side of the map, see what they're up to. What's going on, boys? Right? Like, it's easy stuff like that gives like the giant wins for low-level players.
That's actually genius. You've just given me flashbacks of like running in with that scout and trying to kill dudes chopping wood every game and being like, oh, it doesn't do damage. It does almost nothing. And I'm like, I think I'm doing it. Okay, it literally is. It's called a scout. It's just a scout. And like a villager basically beats it. Like, I'm like, okay. That's actually really cool. And I love that example because, even the most ancient and crusty RTS nerd can't argue with that, because Age of Empires 2 is, such a well-respected game that has such a long community and such an interesting variety of gameplay in it. But yeah, I think this is awesome. I think all of this, and the more I hear you guys talk, the more excited I get. And the more excited I get for getting into the game more, and especially when that closed alpha comes out and everything, because for me, it really is completely fresh. And it's something where, people have often asked me as someone, hey, what happens, after Starcraft? What are you going to do? And as a personal person, I was like, I would love something new and different. For me, I was thinking maybe I'd get into Warcraft 3 Remastered when it came out, just because it would be cool to change the RTS experience in a meaningful way and get something that's very fresh and different that still hits the same points of satisfaction. And as you guys said, it's about feeling the fidelity of the game, the reactivity. It's being able to kind of control your units and feel that they're under your control, not you're flailing, right? Which is the common experience in a lot of games where there's too much suddenly happening at once and you're disorganized and, just select all army and try to smush it somewhere, but all of our workers are dying and everything's going to hell in a handbasket. So I think this gives a good bit of overview of the philosophy of the game, what you guys are trying to do. So in terms of resource system gameplay, if we had to give just a very quick summary of, okay, so is this capture the point, Company of Heroes style? Is it minerals and gas kind of thing? Is it 5 resources like Age of Empires? Just give us a quick rundown of the basics of the game in that regard.
Who wants to tackle it?
I think Tom.
Yeah, sure. I haven't spoken in a while. That sounds good. You guys just have better answers than I do to the same questions, and I'm like, no, I've talked enough. I've talked so much this StarCraft 2, folks. I have to talk to you guys a ton. I'll mostly let these guys do the talking. But yeah, so we've got it's a 3 resource RTS. It's an economy-based RTS. It is a large army RTS, and it is not a hero RTS, right? And so those large army hero RTS are kind of juxtaposed. You can have one or the other. And we decided to make a large army RTS. That's not that hero RTS are bad or we don't like them. It's just a different kind of a game. And we were wanting to go more down the StarCraft 2 route than the Warcraft 3 route.
Just to touch on that point very quickly.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely it. We've talked a bit about this in my stream recently, talking about different RTS games, and it's just if you focus the power and centralize it, it does take away the multitasking and the stretched out element, which I think we're all in agreement. I know I am. The Brood War magic was the stretched out element, the many small fights spread across, and it's the tangible feeling of 2 players wrestling over the map that is great for a spectator and great for a player as well. So I personally, big fan. You guys have gone in that direction, but that's awesome. So big armies, not hero based. You've got your 3 resources.
And then the Immortal System is kind of a blend between MOBA and RTS in a bit. So you've got these normal factions, these base factions. Let's say there's 12 units in a base faction. Well, if I'm playing Orzoom, 2 of those units from the base faction are gone, and they're replaced with special, designed for the highlight reel, very skill intensive a lot of the time units that will put a different kind of spin on that base unit. So Orzoom has a sword melee unit that can gain range when in hallowed ground, instead of the spear melee unit, that's the base unit, that has extra reach. So it's just kind of a different take on the same thing. And so what that allows you to do is that allows you to have a different flavor of Zerg. We can have 7 different flavors of Zerg. And you can decide, I kind of want to play a more multitask-oriented kind of a Zerg, or I want to play with like lurkers and a field of spores, and I want to like control the map and things like that. And so it's cool because you talked about things feeling fresh and different. This is an open system game, and I think it's really important to distinguish it because a lot of the things in closed system games like StarCraft 2, which have 3 races, that's it. There's never going to be any more. For us, everything's always going to be fresh and new. There's going to be a new faction that comes out every year or every year and a half, depending on how it works out. There's going to be a new flavor of Zerg for you to play this year. It's coming out. It's the Abathur Zerg, and you've got +5/+5 upgrades because the dude loves evolution. I don't know. Whatever it might be. And so there's just so many toys to play with, so many like little Lego bricks that I'm really excited to see the creative players and the players that like to break the meta really get in there and start doing work, and to see that sort of churn of like, oh, this is the dominant strategy, not for long, and then someone comes around and gets something else out, or some change comes into the game and now everything's a little bit mixed up and people have to try to find their footing again.
That's cool.
So I think that's all the basic overview stuff for the game.
And that's going to plug in very well too. I mean, you guys are clearly planning to do a lot of just continual support and content. This isn't a one and dropped game. This is hey, we're adding on more of that constantly and adjusting and evolving. So you guys are thinking of it as an active kind of balancing for the game. It's not a let's create one static system. That allows you guys to drop more content for the game, which of course leads to revenue. It also leads to fresh plays, fresh strategies, leads to, if there is something, and most games, there's always something that gets found to be overpowered. Things are being rotated around, actively balanced and changed, and there's going to be a new kind of immortal characters coming out, so you can get different units, different little adjustments and that sort of stuff, different global spell abilities. So I think that's something where you guys are kind of planning for it to be an ongoing, very much the modern let's create a community and an ongoing experience, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
It
Absolutely.
so Coulter put it really well early on when we were drafting out the 4 core criteria for this game, where he said we need to build a game and an ecosystem that aligns the interests of funding partners, developers, players, and the community. And I think the big thing in today's sort of era of game development, there's been sort of a souring over the last 6 years. Not just in RTS or around RTS, but just generally, where things have become more polarized. Tensions and feelings have run high, and an assumption, sort of a fundamental assumption of bad faith, have crept into different parts of the gaming industry towards sort of other factions within that. And we want to kind of set the record straight and kind of lead by example and show no, like you can have a game that is profitable and shareholders can be happy with, and you can have game and monetization systems with integrity that treat people with respect and give people good value, and you can have a game that has excellent gameplay for not just the people with the highest churn rate at the bottom of the skill pyramid or the top 0.001%. You can create an ecosystem where everyone feels welcome and everyone feels like they can kind of put in and invest in each other. So we've been working really hard for the better part of a decade now to facilitate just that. The only reason we started seeking funding and recruiting people who had a lot more experience than us to teach us was when we fulfilled every criteria that we laid down for ourselves. And it took us years to do that. And we weren't sure when we started if we could.
Yeah, that's been a very slow road where you guys have done a vast amount of testing and ideas and figuring out exactly what you wanted to do, right? Before kind of taking it to this level. And I mean, I'm super bloody excited. I want to congratulate you guys for how well the Kickstarter's done so far and the fact that it continues to get a lot
Thank
of
you.
excitement. If something starts a Kickstarter, or especially if something goes early access, sometimes they are met with just pure positivity, but there's often as well quite a lot of naysayers, and I feel like I have seen the percentage, the more announcements and the more interviews you guys do, and the more you talk about exactly what your goals are, the percentage is going vastly positive, and I'm seeing all the people that have backed it kind of saying, "Hey, this is something I'm really happy I backed." The more I hear about it, the more excited I am. So I think this is a great, marketing step, is the more you guys just keep talking about this, the passion shines through, the design philosophy, and I think you guys are doing it the right way. Interacting with smaller content creators as well as larger ones, and getting so much playtesting going on. It feels like you guys are doing your due diligence and above when it comes to, hey, we want to make something that is well received, well loved. You're kind of very flexible on the feedback and that sort of stuff. So far, thumbs up for me, and it's looking bloody fantastic. Just a quick reminder to anyone who's watching live on the show to put their comments in the form in the chat. By the way, we might take a couple of, if there's a few gems in there of kind of viewer submitted and chat questions at the end of the episode. But for now, I think if you guys are keen, we can get through and start talking about some cool little reveals and some nice little things that you guys were willing to share. Anything else you guys wanted to talk about before we get into that?
Oh yeah, I had a random comment. I think actually, so you mentioned as an example like the Dark Souls games as a punishing hardcore experience, and I actually want to push back on that a little bit because I think the Dark Souls experience is how you make a hardcore game well. The key thing that makes Dark Souls work is they're incredibly consistent with the rules of going like, hey, this attack is going to hit this way. You're going to see it. There's going to be an audio cue, and there are consequences for, failing to block or dodge out of the way or get a good counter. And I think that actually like when hardcore sort of old sourdough players, Praetor Archer on the Frost Giant forums and on the Reddit and our Reddit, thank you for being a crotchety old man. We really appreciate you. But these people like are very like their concerns are very reasonable and is their skepticism. People usually aren't just like irrationally difficult or or just reactionary for the sake of it. Those reactions, whether they're emotional or rational, are rooted in, I think, a real concern. People in that camp, and most people, want games that have consequences for your action, because that's kind of the point. Like, that's the core feedback loop. Your decisions have weight and matter. And I think there is a well-placed fear, because there have been attempts to lower the skill floor in RTS by slashing and burning the skill ceiling. And that reduces the weight of consequences. And so, we have the game that we have right now, and we will have the game that we will have when this game launches, by listening to people and really drilling down and go, like, what is the problem that you are trying to solve? Because we're not going to assume that people are necessarily wrong or right, but we do assume that they're coming from ultimately a place of good faith, and they're trying to prevent something, that they think is bad from happening. So we're always looking for, how can we win together? How can we come together from different perspectives and different needs and create an experience that facilitates everyone?
Okay, so what I'm hearing is Immortal is going to be basically Nexus Wars, and that's
True.
Behind with ads with paywalls, and everything is Protoss, but knocked off and legally distinct for obvious reasons.
I'm pretty sure we just have a faction that only has one unit in one building, and that's the Void Ray and the Shield Battery. Starcraft 2 was having such a fun time with that. We really think that's the way it should be.
You forgot, though, that there's a transform function that automatically happens, where the shield battery also splits off into the mothership core.
Oh, this is basically just a nice username video at this point, where it's like the Void Ray just goes around and it just shoots like 27 beams and annihilates an entire army in a base, and for some reason the shield battery's floating behind it on a tether. Like, you're like, what is going on?
It is skill intensive, though, because even though it does have moving shot, there is an active ability that costs 500 premium gems.
Yeah. You really got to farm those gems.
Well, it's okay.
By the way, we do have a I'm sorry.
There's a farm
try to confuse people too much with the
we shouldn't go too deep down the sarcastic train. No, you won't have to play 1 million hours of playtime to get your special Darth Vader Immortal skin. Don't worry, guys.
Oh my god. But the sense of accomplishment.
But
none of that.
As you were saying there, though, just to kind of go back on that, I really agree. I remember, because I didn't play anything but Starcraft for years as a pro player, and in the last 4 or 5 years, I started playing more games and going back on all the games I'd missed, and to iterate are the rules consistent, and if so, consequences can be stomached, and not by everybody, but it's a differential between different levels of hardcore gamer, right? So you've got Dark Souls. I remember saying, like, hey, I'm really enjoying relaxing with this, and people on my stream would be like, what are you talking about, dude? It's Dark Souls. You die repeatedly. It makes you rage. It's so what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, you guys think it's stressful? And I was like, don't get me wrong, like, I get angry sometimes, but coming from StarCraft, I'm like, it's just iteration, because they have 3 or 4 moves each boss. There's always a tell. There's always it's the same repeat. It's how do I get from here to the next save point? And it's the same order of guys, and you're just building muscle memory, and it's repetitions, and it's learning the tells and learning the skill set. And I'm like, well, you don't get that in any multiplayer game, really. But especially not in a game like StarCraft, where there's always something surprising. There's always something that totally, turns your assumed knowledge, your rules upside down.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're playing something like Dark Souls, is it hard? Is it difficult? Yes, but that's something which I think is eye-opening, because people think there's hardcore gamers, there's casual gamers, but there's not. There's many layers in between.
It's a vast spectrum.
Massive spectrum, right? So Dark Souls is somewhere in the middle, maybe, whereas StarCraft 2 is down an extreme end in terms of the unfair feeling when you die, and the feeling of it's different over and over again every match on the ladder, and you're not getting that repeatability. You die to Dark Templar, you wonder, how do I beat this? In Dark Souls, you get to go back and fight that boss again right away, and iterate and learn, whereas that's hidden from you in a lot of RTS games in general. So I think there's
the space for co-op. Like that's making sure we support co-op and PvE. Like, that's an incredibly important part of what we want to make sure we deliver. Because every single RTS, there's just a giant chunk of people who will play your campaign and leave. There's a giant chunk of people who it's the majority, right, playing StarCraft 2's co-op.
It's the majority.
Right? And they're going to play the co-op and just the co-op. and maybe team games every now and then. It is so important to make sure that player base, that type of player, is supported.
Hells
Yeah,
yeah.
I think I want to, if you're all right with a little bit of a dive before we get into reveals, I think that's a really important thing. Wizards of the Coast years ago kind of pioneered this by going like, hey, there are player psychographs. Like there are certain like clades of players that have certain preferences and go and play games for different reasons. And, you know, Magic the Gathering initially only had 3 psychographs. Timmy, who's sort of a casual person who really likes like the story of a game and doesn't really care about the outcome. Spike, who's the invested competitive player who like I've described many, you know, obviously like invested StarCraft players fulfill that profile. It's about self-improvement, it's about winning, it's about optimizing. And then, you know, and the joy that comes from that. And then finally, like people that are like Johnny are called Johnnies, so the TLOs, the incredible, the White Raws, the people who are really interested in creative play and to like bend or break the game in exciting ways that haven't been done before, where the joy is discovery. So we've put a ton of time into understanding why players play games, not just within, you know, RTS, because that is heavily skewed traditionally towards very specific player preferences, and it just happens to like support other preferences just as a passing side note. And just approach our games design and the services that we're going to be offering with the idea of like, well, how many people like to play games? Oh, wow, it's a lot of them. Okay, well, make sure that our experiences can appeal to those players without, you know, making an either or. So, yep.
I think that's one of the really interesting things. We get questions in the community talking about like someone will ask me, well, what do you want? And you know, I'll tell them what I want, but it's what I want isn't what's going to make it into the game. What's going to make it into the game is the thing that makes the game work. And what I want is completely irrelevant to that, right? We're all sort of here in service to the game. And so it's just a very weird sort of context shift for a lot of people because they expect this sort of ivory tower designer decrees what they want and it is so kind of a situation, which is it's just not what we're doing.
Yep.
I think it's too complicated to be that simple with such a big project as well, right? And this is it can't just be a single vision, and it's a process that you guys are clearly deeply involved in, right? It's a collaborative process between you, the community, the play testers. It's not just a we want this. It's you guys are learning as you go.
Yep, absolutely. I guess I think we hit all the topics. I was going to talk a little bit about PvE and just aligning the interests of PvE players with like developers and shareholders and all that, but I think Travis already hit that. Fun fact though, over half of all players in League of Legends exclusively play bots versus AI.
Really?
Or co-op versus AI.
Yep.
Really? Wow.
Yep.
Normal
yeah,
people,
it's
man.
amazing.
What? Normies.
Yep.
Oh my god. Bloody normies. What the hell, man?
So, well, we feel we can offer a more robust experience than that. So, yeah.
Awesome. No, I actually agree. So a lot of people, because I come from, people know me as a StarCraft and a competitive StarCraft guy. People are always like, you know, they'll be like, I'll be like, oh yeah, you know, like I loved X Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. I used to play that all the time. People are like, oh cool, like you play this tournament, you do this and I'm like, no, like StarCraft's the only game that I've really been hyper competitive. Like, I've been playing Northgard. Like people are like, oh, do people even play that anymore? Like, do you even find maps? And I was like, oh, I play the conquest mode, man. Like on my own. Like I'm just chilling, enjoying min-maxing my economy. You know, like, and most people do play like that. You know, for me, if I'm playing something else, I'm outside of the occasional shooter. It's very chilled. It's a relaxed thing. It's you know, I'm not putting a crazy amount of high focus into it. I want to be able to pause my game and walk away. You know, there is a different sort of
You're
thing.
You're not treating it like a sport.
Not treating it like a sport, exactly. It's much more of a relaxed hobby, and it's you know, you do need to cater to those players in RTS and strategy games especially, because a lot of people get satisfaction out of min-maxing their builds. They're, you know, choosing, in your case though, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who are like, oh, I want to do this commander and try this sort of, you know, this immortal, this strategy out. and there's going to be a lot of people wanting to get that experience. So how specifically are you going to cater to those people the most? Do you guys have a clear idea? Do you want a special verse AI co-op style? I know you guys are very keen on team games as a core part of the gameplay as well. How do you want to get that side
where to start?
engaged?
So we have Wave Wars. You want to talk about Wave Wars, Tom?
Yeah, sure. So one of the really important things that I think is a part of the StarCraft 2 ecosystem is the arcade. Having different variety modes that you can play. But there are a lot of challenges to getting user-generated content, both legal and technical. And so it's really important that we create these variety modes, that we have them in the game, and we can be a little bit more careful about how we design them and how we make them, because we're making them, we have the understanding of the game itself. We can make these little variety modes as sort of stepping stones to get you to wherever you want to go. I need to talk about the tutorial a little bit. The tutorial is very weird. The tutorial is not actually a tutorial. The tutorial is more of like StarCraft Master if it was constantly developed and improved and made realistic by a gameplay experience. And so Wave Wars is very sneakily actually a step on the tutorial to learning about the game.
Awesome.
And so I want you to imagine, like, let's say 100 mini games that all kind of break the game into its little pieces. And the most important pieces you'll learn first, and then you'll be able to freely explore and move around the space. And so you learn the basic thing, your basic skills, attack, move, move, command, things like that. Then you can enter into co-op. You can do solo mini campaigns that are like 4 to 7 missions long that'll introduce a particular faction. We'll have one of those per faction. We'll have repeating co-op maps, just like co-op StarCraft 2, with a lot of replayability, mix and match play, and things like that. And so you'll be able to, from your first 5 minutes, you'll have all the basic skills you need to either play PvE or jump into verse bots game. Or if you're that player that really likes to grind it out and like get the perfect score on these little things, then you'll just chill in the trainer for a little while, and you can enjoy that space. But it's ultimately this, like Dylan was saying, this democratization where the player gets to decide how they want to experience the game, and we create a sort of web of decision making that allows players to play the game the way they want to, and we make sure that every different type of a player has something for them.
And
something really key as part of the co-op. The co-op StarCraft 2 is like arguably the most popular part about StarCraft 2 right now, right? Because it has that replayability, right? That you just constantly keep going, making it harder, level up your characters, right? And always has something fresh and new, and just this crazy variety of experience. We're doing something pretty crazy. So all of our units are built in a way that you can swap out parts of their models with different skins. So you can kind of play a little army builder, right? By
it's like
your spear and shield is now different on your spearman, and then you can have another part of the where you swap out the rest of the body as another item.
And is that just aesthetic, or does it change the
That
stats?
is aesthetic in PvP and in most in a lot of PvE modes. But then there's also like the co-op part where you can actually play this kind of like Diablo type experience where you're kitting out your army and they're getting buffs and different effects depending on the rarity, where you're increasing the difficulty of the game, but at the same time you're kitting out your army and you're getting these random drops and like building your perfect synergies, right? So you get this really addictive Diablo-esque loop at the same as you're playing this already. What's very, very addictive of this, leveling up of your PvE co-op StarCraft 2
that
type
experience, like the kind of 3 holy pillars that I'm looking to for PvE design is XCOM's like core system of like going out, going on an adventure, engaging in an intense, fun, strategic experience, and then coming back with a haul, and then like tinkering with your army and like fitting it out, retrofitting it, and then going out again. Obviously, ideally with a buddy. And that's one. Two, sort of the Warhammer 40K experience, and this applies both to PvE and PvP experiences where, like you're happy to spend a lot of time and money building up an army in that community, but the vast majority of your time and resources are being sunk into like the expression, like, and going like, no, this army is uniquely mine and it feels really cool, and like I've sourced all these different things, and there's always something to tweak and prod and optimize. And then the last one is like the fun of like a good D&D like dungeon delve or a Diablo 3 like boss run, where you're coordinating with your buddy and you are, reaping the rewards of conquest, and just there's that fun, smashing, like kinesthetically pleasing experience. So that's kind of like the golden triangle that we're targeting.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, this makes such a big difference because a lot of people, and this is something I'm so passionate about, you do not need to be improving at a multiplayer competitive game to enjoy it. You do not need to be getting better. If one more person says I'm hard stuck in X League and I can't improve and complains about it, like I'm going to lose my mind, because like I rant about this on a daily basis. I'm like, it doesn't need to be a problem. We don't all need to be improving. We can't all be the best at everything. It's not realistic. If our entire enjoyment is just being better than everybody else, well, everyone but Sarah is very upset, or everybody except Raynor right now is very upset, right? This
Flash
is something
intensifies.
Exactly. So I think there's something there about giving that personal ability to tinker and change loadouts and that sort of thing, and kind of tinker with that. It creates recreability, right? This is why so many games have randomly generated levels now. Things like you can replay XCOM, and it's kind of the same.
Is critical.
But it's a little bit, you can iterate and I'm going to go this build this time. I'm going to go with these guns, and it's the same in strategy games, especially where a lot of people, we get to a point where most gamers aren't actively trying to learn the optimal strats and become the best. We just want a new experience that forces us to adapt a little bit, to play a little bit differently so that it's not stale. And that's what you want. And you can get that through, random generation, but you can also get that through, hey, you tinker with your loadout, you change your build a little bit outside of the in-game gameplay, and your goal is a little bit different. And these also funnel players down decision making as well. Oh, I'm going to use this and this, so that's going to mesh well with this sort of strategy. I am going to focus on that. So anything that allows players to pick their loadout to, and even on just the level of changing the immortal and changing those two key units a little bit, and your activatable ability, it's going to funnel people down having a strategy in mind when they start the game, whether it be a PvE or a PvP. And I think that's a very important element, because too often in RTS games, people go in and go, cool, I'm going to try and absorb all the information like a sponge and react to things that happen. And it's so much easier as those things get broken down. You go into it, you go, oh, I'm going to try and do this and this because I've got these abilities that are leading into that. And I think that's something where that's going to be really good for people getting hooked and being able to play over and over again and spend those many hours outside of the competitive grind. You get invested in the
core experience. Yep. I think the key thing is making good on the promise of the player fantasy that your game is offering. And I think that's sort of something where like the RTS once delivered with the campaign, but when it came to the prospect of playing with other human beings, like it definitely struggled to like update, like to modernize and to evolve to sort of a broader and frankly sort of like larger group of sort of expectations and experiences. The way that the user experience story that Tom usually tells people is kind of puts it in very stark details. It's like, okay, this is a game about commanding this big badass army, building this amazing army, and getting into big fights. Here's like a laundry list of chores that you have to perfectly perform, or you're going to get crushed by a stranger on the internet and not know how or why you lost. And that's a hard sell these days. And so what we want to do is provide many different vectors for players to get invested and like actually taste that fantasy and go like, wow, that is a really fun experience. And then, provide them points of reference and points of motivation to go, yeah, I can get better about this. That discovery turns into a desire for mastery naturally and emergently. And we've seen this play out in League of Legends. We've seen it play out in
Battle
Dota 2,
royales.
Battle Royales. Absolutely. Yep.
So we've just got Travis's camera freaking
Yeah,
out a
my
little
camera's
bit
going
for whatever
crazy.
reason.
It's
Been corrupted by
amazing.
the hair lash.
I
And it's
like it.
back.
Yeah,
It's back.
hair
There
lash.
we go.
Yep.
Just slowly getting corrupted
Heard
a
you
little
talking
bit.
about
mic
it, man.
filter.
There might be some. Maybe you've been worshiping any blood gods or anything, and some weird
Yeah, I
rituals
think
going
this is
on.
a good transition. I think he's revealing his ARU mode. So
Heck yeah! All
There's a
right.
little more Halesh.
yeah,
I guess we can switch to the reveal. It's fine. We're ready, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
we'll
we're
just
ready.
Instantly
Yeah,
switch
just
it with
switch
brand
faction
new
we're revealing.
materials.
Let's go.
yeah.
Let's
I'm
get
down.
right on into it.
Pipelines.
All right, so we're going to show off some cool stuff, and I guess we'll just be quiet for a little bit. We'll watch this video and take a look through because you guys are revealing the ARU. It's too quick. We want more. I want to play that again. One more time. I'll mute it this time, but goddamn, this has me excited. Because awesome. This is honestly, I mean, I get excited by factions. There's a reason why I liked kind of Zerg and Brood War, and that got me a bit hooked on that. But seriously, I mean, what the hell are we looking at? I see blood. I see tree dudes. I see friggin' weird, throbbing, gross things. I mean, this is the amount of dirty jokes I'll make once I get my hands on playing the ARU. Like, what the hell? This looks great.
Oh yeah, there's some Mother Goddess vibes going on, like old school Venus. Yeah, actually, so
Hit him with the
yeah.
lore.
Yeah. So a bit about me. I am a compulsive world builder. I'm sure I build worlds in my sleep, and I have an academic background in medieval history. I'm a dual major in history with a medieval focus and English language. So I spent a lot of time reading medieval texts and doing a lot of stuff. So one of the coolest things about ARU is it's an opportunity to kind of move beyond sort of the European sort of standard narrative and get into different parts of history and anthropology. So for our factions, we look at different mythologies and societies and cultures throughout human history as points of reference. For Karath, it was the Ottoman Empire, the Persian Empire, and the Byzantine Empire as sort of the principal touchstones. With ARU, we're looking really heavily at sort of the Mesoamerican Empire, so like Toltecs, Aztecs, as well as elements of ancient Celtic stuff, and looking for common points of resonance, of emotional resonance. And sort of the common theme is there's this view that creation in these sort of worlds runs on this sort of vital lifeblood, and then also is somehow imperiled or is in the prospect of dying unless it is renewed somehow, usually through sacrifice of some kind. So the ARU are neat because they don't live on the same planet that the Karath do. The Karath live on this sort of more gentle, arid world called Shale, whereas the ARU live in this fucking wild sort of interior planet called Nuoth. And it is supercharged with tons of sort of magical energy and light from the star because it's a lot closer. And as a result, life and evolution and metabolisms are on fast forward. And so you have to be really hardcore if you're going to scratch out a living on that planet. And the ARU are a splinter off species of what used to be the dominant species in a large part of Nuoth, a different faction that we'll reveal down the road called ItTaK. And the way these guys have scratched out, their territory is by aligning themselves with this, I guess the best way to put it is this Lovecraftian life mother, this carnivorous, omnivorous god tree that consumes worlds and incorporates them into her ecosystem, and she's called the Coolathon. So, like, the best way I can put it, it's like the Navi from Pandora in the most heavy metal context that you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, dude. When I first saw a little bit of these guys a while back when I was chatting to you guys, and I was like, oh my god, like, dude, the bloody wood elf type creatures got corrupted by chaos, and I mean, shit's hit the fan. Like, I dig it, man. It's so sick. I mean, let's just say if Doom guy went to this world, like he'd be fighting these guys. I think he'd be trying to rip some heads off and stuff because they got a nice demonic vibe to them.
Yeah, so one thing we wanted to do with these guys is we wanted them to look eerie, kind of graceful, but in this sort of like almost grotesque sort of way. There's elements of body horror, but it's pretty subtle, and we wanted to tie it to sort of life, like birth, consumption, and death. And these are like themes that are played around with the different immortals that lead them. It's a strictly sort of matriarchal society. There are some powerful male individuals, but they're relatively few and far between, because they're imitating this goddess that has just filled them with power and has driven their evolution in these really like extreme ways. And mechanically, they're just really neat. I'm not going to talk too much about this because this is more of a Travis thing, but one of the key things we wanted to do is whenever you're playing these guys, you want to feel like you're hunting your opponent, you're stalking them, and we really dialed that up to 11 with like the Prophet of the Hunt, Zol. But we really wanted to get into that top down. We try not to do top down or bottom up design where we start with mechanics or start with theme, but we try to develop them in parallel around this sort of common point. And I think ARU is it's the first immortal faction I think we ever designed. I think Culture started with the first like unit analogs of like, what if you could have Dark Templar, Mutalisks, siege tanks, and Marines in the same comp. And that is more or less like remained one for one true. The Dark Templar definitely changed a bit, but I think the cool thing, yeah, it turns out that was very broken. But the cool thing I think thematically about them is their resource system, where you basically have a mana analog called Blood that regenerates more slowly than mana would or energy would in Starcraft. But you can always cast it if you have enough hit points. So you can redline your army and push your army to the brink of death to get that extra edge of your opponent. And oh my god, the stories that are going to naturally emerge out of this faction are going to be fucking legendary.
Dude, I just love it, man. Like, just that blood resource is so cool. So, I mean, there's going to be, yeah, don't get attached to your guys. I mean, stimming to the red is going to be a legitimate choice here. You're consuming your own units.
Oh, yeah.
Damn, it's like people are like, all right, we need a bit more blood. Let's just open our veins a little bit. I mean, this is a very cool faction.
Oh yeah,
they don't have medics for this faction. It's important.
Yeah, very important. Which actually like speaks to the importance of mixing and matching. So like Karatha, because they have an early healer, or Jorah also has the Doc. Both are 1.5 healing support units. This creates like that cross faction synergy. So the lady, by the way, with the scythe arms that keeps rotating around, that's the Bloodbound, and she's like the ultimate example of like, I think she's one of the most ARU units that we have. Period. Because she is the Dark Templar analog. She is a nimble, like middle tier assassin that is. I mean, you want to
I can describe her. Yeah. So
yeah.
So yeah, the Bloodbound doesn't take too much tech to get to it, but it is so fun to use and so annoying to fight. We actually had to dial back down on the annoyance to fighting it. It used to have some stealth properties, so it had a mechanic on it called Hidden. That's a mechanic we're going to use for a lot of units, where Hidden works instead of things are just cloaked or not cloaked. Instead, they are cloaked until you have a unit within X range. So it had like Hidden 3, so you had to get a unit within 3 range and then become uncloaked, and then you could fire at it. That was still too annoying because this unit is very fast, right? It's quite a bit faster than like a standard Zealot type speed. When it hits units, it gains health as it's hitting units. So if you're harassing a worker line and they're trying to like fight back, you're like, well, I'll just keep chunking you and just getting my health back. They're obviously fragile, and then when they can teleport, so they have a blink type move, and then wherever they teleport to, within a short range, if the closest unit to the unit the closest point unit to the point you teleport to gets nuked for like 160 damage and more
Yeah,
if it's a caster.
Yeah, she literally jumps out of the ground with these like giant scythes screeching at them, and then just fucking impales them.
So you can use that as a mobility tool, or you can go assassinate casters from the side using your speed. So if you jump into assassinate casters, it might be a one-way trip, or you just might turn a fight and run away. So
very important question. So are we doing more of an ultralisk hug, or are we doing a psycho stab from above?
Absolutely psycho stab. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, Psycho Mantis.
Yep.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And
Psycho
very
Mantis,
importantly,
like, and she's drinking the blood while
really
she's fighting.
good use.
Amazing.
Yeah. This unit makes such good use of the ARU mechanic, where it can keep paying with life, because you'll be able to cast your jump, your teleport once, and you'll get into their worker line, right? Wait for the cooldown. You'll go kill some guys, and then you'll teleport out, but you're eating a bunch of your life, right? So you can just jump in, kill stuff. Okay, I have enough life, and I can teleport again to kill something really quick, and then I'll harvest a little bit more life, and then jump out with that extra life, right? And those sorts of things will be balanced via cooldowns when they need to be.
Yep.
Awesome.
Currently, it's a very low cooldown.
So you'll jump out with red HP after just running around like a ground mutalisk.
That is incredible. I mean, that's really cool. And the thing is, because there is going to be less taxing macro mechanics, less mundane macro mechanics. I mean, there is going to be, the idea here is these sort of things are going to have insane skill ceilings, right? Like, I'm sure you guys have already figured out your own little tricks with like different units, and I'm sure you've seen some of the play testers and pro gamers you've got in there already kind of doing things you didn't expect. So yeah, you guys surprised often when you guys kind of fiddle around with different units and that sort of stuff, and especially developing the first faction that you guys have had the most experience with, or, how often are you guys kind of like, what the hell?
Every now and then, but like to be fair, I did, like, micro is just the thing I did just way too much of. Just experimenting with different micro mechanics, and we're not going to be like entirely Brood War. Like the day is long past since Brood War, but we definitely have a big emphasis on making sure that we do have room for all that micro skill, right? So things like we have to be careful about things like Zealot Charge, right? Zealot Charge, just due to the sheer speed, kind of removes micromanaging that troop to a degree, right? It becomes way more about pre-position, where we want to make sure that control that you have in a game like Brood War still exists, right? So there is definitely going to be, hopefully, a lot of tricks as we add in like all these tiny little different mechanics that we can fit into units. That in general, like Starcraft 2 is not going to have like a blood drain plus a teleport plus that teleport does deal damage, right? We have a little bit more room for that fidelity on a single unit. But yeah, we want to make sure that even the basic way that units move and fight, right? Like in StarCraft 2, they always have a problem of range units always just kind of kiting back versus melee units, and then the melee units don't get to micro. So we have that down to a science where we can make sure that the melee units actually can counter micro. So you can accomplish those sorts of things using your wind up time, the time it takes for you to start respawning after you've clicked after firing. And then you can actually make it to where microing melee units actually has that counter kite potential, which is something that people will learn and actually use, and kind of like push the range units and actually hound them a certain direction, and there'll be a little bit more back and forth there. Similar to Hydras and Zealots in Brood War, that just doesn't really exist generally in most RTSs.
It's funny, you sometimes actually get some of the most satisfying unit interactions in StarCraft 2, only if you're like a mega cheeser, where you end up with like slow zealots fighting slow zerglings and stuff like that.
No units.
Yeah, you're like, when none of those upgrades are done, you're like, this is really cool. Like, it's slow enough that I can process it a little bit.
It was like the ultimate micro game. It was like, what was it? It was like Huck Naniwa or something, where it was like Protoss super early game. It was just like 5 or 6 units, and they were just like microing to the last, and the last star goes down. It's like, yes. Oh man.
Yep.
It's awesome because you can
I
really
have
process
to
what's
pull
happening.
back units.
What? Instructions
Sorry.
unclear. Parting all in.
I'm sorry. Battles are supposed to end in 3 seconds. You won't have time to pull back units.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
So there's a few other things that I want to nerd out about. So one thing that we got to test a ton of like variant types of units in the StarCraft 2 engine during the Vanguard days. Some have directly like been ported over, and others more often have been subject to a lot of changes. One of my favorite ones, so this is a faction of dislodgers, and there isn't a really good analog for. It's not like Karath, where people like look at it and go like, okay, so this is like the expensive big faction. This is similar in a lot of ways to Protoss in terms of tech tree, though there's a lot of similarities to Terran as well with Karath under the hood. But there's a pretty clear analog. ARU doesn't really. ARU is this really unique blend of like it has Terran style infantry in the sense that it wants to keep the distance against its enemy until it has an advantage and then wants to chase them down. And anchoring that sort of mobile bio style with strong positional tools like the underspine, which is the sort of like hermit crab from hell that keeps rotating around, which is a strong positional unit that lets you do some really nasty stuff with your range compositions. But we also have like we have things like analogs to Mutalisks and Broodlords in this faction. So you can force, as well as like units like the Bloodbound that don't really have a clear analog anymore to anything that exists in a Blizzard RTS, or like the Scion of Lakulathon, which is morphed from one of your like high tier casters, which is a giant like siege tremor worm thing. Like this thing is like this faction is, it's wild. It's absolutely terrifying to play against. And
I could talk about his playstyle a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. If this is going to be very few people, unless you've seen like some of the big tournaments, but so in Vanguard, this is the closest thing to our Warfield faction. So the Warfield playstyle is where they've got that element of like StarCraft 2 Terran, where they just want to be really, really aggressive with small quantities of troops that are extremely mobile and run around, do a lot of damage, hunt down targets of opportunity. And they're supplemented by some extremely good, very TVT-esque levels of being able to entrench an area and slow push somewhere, right? So it's that complete diametrically opposed playstyle of super fast units and then make way for the slow siege to come in, right? So it's either you go full trying to pick your opponent apart and death by a million pieces, death by a million cuts, or you make room for your some of the best slow siege style pieces in the game.
I think
it's kind of like their main playstyle.
That's a cool dynamic, right? Yeah. So it's ambushing, hunting, and kind of moving around a lot. It's that backstabbing and really picking and choosing, but then you've still got the big slow. So it's almost like you could say it's like a biomech, in a very well understood thing. It's like you're almost always probably going to be starting with the more mobile style and then going to the slower, but I'm sure there's a lot of choice depending on how each player plays. So I mean, I got really excited just hearing you guys talk on the Pylon show about the two immortal options for the race, and the idea of, you guys mentioned, so you've either got shadow meld, kind of that invisibility you guys were describing before when you're immobile, or you've got the kind of extra sensitile vision through the fog of war around all your
Zol's
units.
wild, dude. Yeah, so Zol is like
sense.
Yeah, so Zol is the prophet of the hunt. She is like tasked by Lakulathon to finding the most worthy prey and killing the shit out of it and bringing that superior blood back to the mother that will strengthen the ecosystem, and doing so strengthen her and her kin. And I think she was the first like really cohesive immortal design where when we laid out her kit, it just sort of clicked and we were like, okay, this is how we build immortals in this game. So every immortal has a passive that will define their playstyle. Orzoom, our big Archangel guy, he's a positional commander, so he gets a discount on towers and he can upgrade towers into super towers just to really reinforce that I'm about annexing the map. Zol is like the exact opposite. She is all about like hunting and positioning and getting these sweet ambushes and prodding for weaknesses. And so every single one of her units basically is a miniature sensor tower passive where they can see a little bit into the fog of war and see where units are relative to them. So you want to talk about an impossible skill ceiling. Like if you get someone like Sarah or Flash playing these guys, like you aren't going to see the units until like Polt style, like they're like, ah, yeah, I can get a winning fight here. And then like you're fighting them. And it's going to be terrifying. It's a knife fight in the darkness. And her ultimate, which is a big ult, which we don't expect to be seen a lot in pro play, but sometimes, it's basically a Nocturne ult from League of Legends that lasts for like 30 seconds, where all of a sudden, like just like dark blood mist just floods through the environment, and enemy unit sight is like reduced significantly, and your units get all friendly units get a speed bump. And so it's all of a sudden it's like, okay, 30 seconds, we get map control and we get to have initiative on fights, and it's up to the other team to hold out until that storm's passed. So like it's such a clear play pattern, character identity, and like power fantasy and play experience all rolled into one.
Oh, dude, the blood moon cometh, and yeah, I mean, you can just imagine being on the receiving end of that.
Oh, the lines that she has are fucking lit, dude.
It's so cool. I mean,
it's gonna be great.
I love what you said as well. Just like, the skill ceiling on if you can see through the fog a little bit, that sort of thing. Same with, it's with the shadow meld type, the invisibility as well, the cloaking there. I mean, I think of like Jaedong with his little Zerglings running around in Brood War trying to like find these little flanking angles and scout and probe in and pull back. And, it's the fact that you've got something that's going to encourage that for everybody to do, and you're not going to be necessarily terribly mismacroing. I mean, obviously there's more things you can do. You can be expanding. There is more, but I like the idea there of you can press an average Joe player to be like, yeah, I'm going to try and make use of this and set up an ambush, and I'm going to try and track this army here, and they can't quite see me, and I can just kind of figure out where he's coming and set up this big flank or something like that. I mean, that's the exciting tactics.
The vanguards that Zol has lend themselves so well to that experience that you just described. So she doesn't have Zol doesn't have the masked hunters because they're not hardcore enough hunters for her. She has her own
basic infantry.
Yeah. So she swaps out basically a marine for like a son of Korhal, like a super marine, or like a night elf archer kind of analog, called a bone stalker. And Bone Stalkers with an upgrade, so they don't have sort of a stim analog ability that makes them better at chasing them enemies down. They are ambush. They're an ambush infantry. When they stabilize, which is when they are standing still for a certain period of time, they become hidden, and they maintain that hidden buff even after they move for a while, and they will get bonus damage to their next attack. And if you stabilize before that buff runs out, it will reset. So you can literally move entire like contingents of these bone stalkers around the map, and the enemy, if they don't have detection or they're not like paying super close attention, you're going to be able to surround them, and they won't know what's happening until they're on top of them. So like, yeah, it's a fucking sweet setup, man. Like it's one of my very favorites.
And the thing is, I mean, so this all is definitely hitting my buttons of nerding out over the potential cool stuff you can pull off, plays in your mind and how they should play out perfectly. But knowing you guys, I'm sure there is an eye to making sure there's counterplay to everything, right? So hey,
they've been tested.
Yeah, it's not, oh, all your vision's gone and then you just lose the game, lol. I'm sure you're watching. You've got players who've played against it, and it's like, bam, they pull back behind their tower and they're pulling their units back from, making sure they don't get surrounded, and then bam, blood moon's over, and you're getting back out there and trying to counterattack. And definitely, as cool as these abilities sound, the idea of, oh, you can see a bit through the fog of war, it's not a screen and a half. It's not like each unit is a sensor tower.
No,
right?
It's like one range.
Magnitude is important. And we often default to the extreme magnitudes of statements. Know that we're balancing the magnitudes out, guys.
Yep.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. I mean,
I mostly rely on Travis for this, so when I say we, I just mean Travis. It's his problem, not mine.
Well, Travis
yeah.
is.
I mean, as creative director, I just go to him and going like, can we put this in the game? And Travis like goes, Jesus, all right, maybe I need to run some tests.
Yeah, I
And
get this.
sometimes
I get
it
this
works.
idea. I mean, does it get tiring, Travis, that these guys like have literally zero restraint on their creativity? They're like, "Oh, could we just have you call in like a spaceship and it just like covers the map and it does this?" And you're like, "No, we can't do that." From the sounds of it, this is the relationship.
My favorite part about the job. I love it. I love when people come up to me with crazy ideas and just this brainstorm, right? Because like I do a lot of brainstorming, but I'm one person. Having even people who like have no idea how to do any game design whatsoever come up with all these crazy ideas that I would never think of just because like I'm one human brain, right? I can't think of everything. And all these insane ideas, and like the amount of amazing gameplay mechanics that got taken from being these extreme, just insane ideas into these really clever, unique mechanics is just so many. It's actually so beautiful to me. I love that process. That's my favorite part of the entire job.
Well, that's great. I mean, this is the best sort of games design dad that you guys have here in Travis. He humors all of your bullshit. I like it.
Wholesome dad and mad scientist all rolled up into one. I mean, Travis is, we've said it many times, but Travis is SunSpear's secret weapon. And I mean, I think he's just one of the best RTS designers that's ever lived. And he's taught us so much. I think part of the reason why it works is we've consistently learned from Travis of understanding what systems break and why, and kind of the ins and outs. And as you understand more of the anatomy of the genre, which is a very deep undertaking that Travis just sort of naturally, I guess, gets because he's just lived and breathed this for so long. You kind of you're
so I'm terrible taking compliments, so let's just move on to the next topic.
Right. Well, okay. So
fast forward, skip cutscene.
Yeah. So the key thing is Travis is really good at telling us like what will break or what is spooky and why. And over time, that lets us be more competent, and basically cut a lot of the sort of chafe ideas out before having to talk to him. And it's definitely a learning process, but like we've gotten to the point where, I think I'm about 50%. I'm worth one half Travis, which makes me a very good designer now. And like, yeah, it's this sort of engine and this sort of domain expertise that's going to let us like, this is why we get to have 5 factions at launch. This is why we're going to have a minimum design space available for 15 factions over the game's lifetime. This is why we can have probably up to 100 immortals eventually in this game and have it all play and feel good.
And everything that Dylan throws at Travis for creative, wild ideas, I'm throwing at him for accessibility stuff.
Yes.
And I'm going to go like, hey, can we do this? Or is this going to destroy like everything on the high level? Because I don't know. But Travis knows, and Travis will say, no, that's a terrible idea because of this. And I'll say, thank you. I'll give you another bad idea tomorrow. And that's I mean, I love being on that end of it. It's for
great.
me. I get this maximum freedom to just be like, okay, I don't really have to totally put it together. I think this will work. Can we do a Travis check? So it's like, let's see. And it's like,
yep.
Excuse me. Awesome. I mean, this is a good environment, I think, because you guys are trying to revisit it all. As you said, RTS without the BS, the catchphrase that I think sums up a lot, and it's really cool to see it kind of develop and evolve. So obviously another thing that a lot of people have been asking about, and there's been comments through the chat. So how do you get access to the alpha? The closed alpha, that's by signing up to the Kickstarter. There are links in the chat, and if you're watching on YouTube, down below there. And definitely worth kind of getting on there and checking it out. But when are things being launched and released? What do people have to look forward to in the near future?
Right. So all eyes are on the Blood Moon and the Blessing of Lakulathon. So with the requisite blood sacrifice, you can get access pretty quickly. Okay, so kidding aside, we're kind of on a variable sort of there's a number of kind of ways this can go, but we're targeting like Q4 of this year for alpha access. And basically beyond that, like sometime next year, we're gearing up for a beta release with 3 factions, each about the size of a Brood War race. So yeah, our main focus for alpha is getting ARU and 4 immortals. So Zol and Mala for ARU, Ajari and Orzum fully functional for Karath. And basically a series of maps or a larger sort of a more diverse sort of array of playtesting experiences, because we really need better data than the current testing map that we have, which is about the size of Submarine. It's a great 1v1 map, and it struggles with 2v2. It's very cozy. So yeah, those are the kind of things that we're focusing on in the coming future.
I think that's awesome to see, and I think it's something a lot of people are excited to just kind of get hands on and get involved, especially as you guys are talking about this as well. So just showing off the Kickstarter there and letting people know how they can sign up already been a very good response, but something I think we all want to see kind of grow and evolve over time. You guys have already been very hands-on with a lot of pro gamers as well. We saw Uthermal drop by in the chat earlier, and a few others say hello and getting a bit excited for things. So, are you guys thinking about trying to get an esports element going pre-release, like maybe running a little test tournament once you have a couple factions going? What are your plans in that regard?
Tom?
I can talk about esports a little bit. So, one of the things that's really important to me is setting up systems that empower the community at large to do their thing, to make content. And so one of the things that we do right now for fun, it's not super serious, is we have a weekly tournament on Saturdays, and we stream it on our Discord server. So if you want to watch it, you just have to join the Discord and hang out. And we alternate 1 versus 1 and 2 versus 2. And that's got no prize pool, but it creates some interesting games and a little bit of competition. And we're working on we don't have a spectator mode, but what we're doing is we're taking the different points of view from each player and then just stitching them into a kind of VOD and then putting it out and saying, hey, if you want to cast this, you can. Here you go. And sort of creating an engine that just keeps pushing that out. So with esports, we really want to be doing this kind of watch what's happening, watch the groundswell, see what people are excited about, empower people, give people resources to do their own thing. And in the long term, we have some really smart, experienced folks behind us that are advising us for long-term esports development. How to avoid the common pitfalls that people fall into, and how to sort of take a grassroots sort of esports and move it into maybe something a little bit more curated, but again, maybe not. We really are focused on sort of taking a step-by-step approach with this. And, we're watching very closely the Overwatch League, all these other, attempts and different things. So that way, when it comes time to make the decision about esports, we're totally ready and sort of prepared for that to occur. But in the meantime, it's all groundswell, all empowering the community.
So that's really good. I'm a big DJ Khaled fan. So when the game launches, intro tournament, we're gonna have Khaled, $5 billion prize pool held in Staples Center, maybe Madison Square.
Yeah,
maybe
the prize is all in Dogecoin though.
Fair enough. That'll be worth $20 billion by then. By the time release comes around, then no worries.
It's all
I'm
about
looking
planning
forward
for the
to it,
long
guys.
term. Stable, responsible economics. Now, I think, basically our goal is to build. Our goal, like with esports, is very similar to just building the game and building, the community. They're all going to be just different organs of a cohesive, healthy organism that's going to thrive and grow. Hashtag Lukulathon conspiracy.
Yeah, hashtag ARU.
Hashtag ARU. The key thing is we want to make sure that our gameplay doesn't get in the way of the needs of an esport, right? So in terms of visual design, we have a lot of points of improvement that we're working on, whether it's animations, whether it's VFX, whether it's just sort of areas of rest versus areas of focus in how we design our units. That's something that we're constantly leveling up and learning about. And that's where professional feedback is absolutely critical. Knowing where we're doing well and where we really need to tighten up or level up is critical. And professional players don't mince words. That's great. We get to hear it from the source, raw and direct, and then we get to figure out why something doesn't work as well as it needs to. So stuff like Beastie Cuties rundown about how Karoth, it looks really homogenous. We took that right on the chin and went, yes, you are right. Let's figure out how and why. Or we got a lot of feedback, especially from this older footage, that, man, this game looks really clunky and unresponsive. It feels more like Warcraft 3 or something. And we did a deep dive and figured out, all the different components that were coming together. We're really worried about our pathing system. No, but the pathing system actually works pretty well. We have a big magic box. That's fine. But it turned out that it was basically the animations didn't react to the turn rate
Rotation
nearly
speed.
quickly. Yeah, it was just
rotation speed on the models gives that psychological feeling of feeling a little more like Warcraft than it is Starcraft, where Starcraft and League have a bajillion miles per hour on rotation, so they feel super snappy. It's just like that something that small can lead to that. It's interesting.
And it's so interesting too when you run into these things where it's like, it's not actually the data, it's not what's happening, it's the perception of what's happening that's the problem. And it's such an important thing to keep in mind.
No, I've hopped in with you guys, and I could tell it was very responsive, even just in the kind of sandbox. Very kind of it's not even an alpha yet, right? It's and yet it did feel very responsive, and that's something which is very important because so many RTS games have been so unresponsive, and it always makes things a little bit awkward when you're trying to control your soldiers and they're not quite reacting.
It just makes a world of difference. Like, if you have really clunky gameplay, it's very hard to be an esport because it becomes much harder to visually and as a player can aesthetically experience the difference between good and great play. It homogenizes. I mean, there's a lot of otherwise fine games that really struggle with that. That fundamental thing of the bones of micro, how a unit moves and shoots, and how that gives visual feedback to the player or the audience. And turns out that kind of snappiness, that kind of Blizzard polish, there's a reason that it's called AAA. The amount of time and effort that goes into making a unit, we're learning firsthand, can be very extreme. And that is one of our main challenges that we have to continuously get better at, learning how to get to that AAA level of polish or feedback faster and faster with every iteration.
And just you guys mentioned getting the pro gamer feedback, not mincing words, and I really just had a moment where I'm like, don't just make sure you're confident in your own beliefs, guys, because I just imagine the home story cup couch, oh, it's broken. That you can't beat that. That's unbeatable. The game's over. That's it.
No. I mean, the way we do this is, so we hold everyone that we have a dialogue with to the same standards that we hold each other with at the office, where we have this process called criteria-based design. It's based on the scientific method, or stuff like crucial conversations, where we all recognize that we're on the same side and we're all trying to solve the same problem. And that's just a critical element of buy-in. It's not adversarial or ego driven. We're investing our ego into a process that is dedicated to finding the best possible solution to the problem. And so we just map out the problem space and go, okay, what's broken? What's fucked here? And then we map out the criteria, what does the ideal solution do? Not what does it look like? What do I personally think that best solution is? What does the solution need to do? And then everyone just starts brainstorming and kind of looking at it at different angles, and it's just transformative. There's no reason not to do it, because everyone's kind of coming at it with their own expertise, but they're putting in the common pot. They're all cooking together, and that's how we got the game that we have.
It's amazing how many problems I have solved in my life, my interpersonal relationships, by simply asking the question, what is the problem you're trying to solve? It's so we have the problem space, we've got the criteria, and we have the solution space. And a lot of times when people are giving feedback, they'll jump right to the solution space. They're like, hey, I have this idea for a solution. and then you're like, well, what is even going on? I think this solution is different, and you've already gone off on the wrong path, because the question you need to ask at that point is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And they're like, oh, well, I'm worried about this occurring, and it's like, oh, well, that's actually not going to occur because this thing is in place, and that's not even a problem you have to worry about. And it's like, oh, okay, we're done. Or it is a problem, and now I understand what's going on, and now I can help in the process of going along. But people can spend an hour in a room yelling at each other, solving different problems, and being upset at the other person because their solution doesn't solve your problem, right?
Yep.
And your solution doesn't solve their problem. You just never have gotten on the same page. So it's over before it gets started. And as far as the pros go and the home story cup couch, so far we may have just got the best pros, but like so far all the pros that we've been working with have been super understanding and fantastic. Like
Incredibly
Dylan
positive
said,
too.
Yeah, very positive and very, very sort of exacting in the feedback, and sort of honest and like, hey, this is weird, and I think it's because of this, but I'm not sure. Or like, what's going on over here? Just like a lot of just starting conversations that we can have together to sort of solve the problem. So, I'm welcome in the more
when you're
pros
doing
come in.
balance. having worked with pros for balance stuff, it's always the complete opposite. The balance is like trying to understand, like, okay, why do you think this? Like, you have to like dig more. Where anytime we talk about like what we're doing with Immortal as a game, pros are like, yeah, I get it, right? Like they immediately get it right away. Like you're trying to get more players, so for a bigger esport, right? Like they form a base for it. Like all this stuff they understand. Oh, that's cool. I understand that. That's a cool mechanic, right? On the fundamentals. As soon as it becomes like factions versus faction balance, anytime I did that stuff, it's like, why is this this unit do this at this like extra tiny bit of speed, and for this faction, I'm like, oh god.
Dude, I mean, I will never forget Firecake cornering David Kim at like one of the WCS events.
Oh,
and it was one of the funniest things I've ever watched in my life. You know, David Kim is like the sweetest guy, and he'd be like, you know, you could
very mild-mannered.
And you've got Firecake, the guy who would literally like just hide hatcheries in the corner of the map if he didn't like the player he'd match on ladder, and walk away from his computer for half an hour, like at the start of the game. Like he's like literally the most bad-mannered, most disrespectful human you've ever met. And he's just there and he's like, Blink Stalkers are broken. He's like, look, but I can fix it for you, okay, David? Okay, David? And David's just there and he's like, oh, okay.
I'd like to have the solution.
I'd like to hear your idea. Okay, sure. Please. And Firecake's like, Stalkers lose 80% of their hit points after they blink. And he's like, something ridiculous like this. And he's like, but only for 10 seconds. So they get one shot by anything right after they blink, so it's fine. But then it'll regenerate or something. It was some ridiculous idea.
That's some galaxy brain shit.
It was insane. And David's just there. He's like, that's a really interesting idea. Oh, yeah. And he just
taken under consideration.
And he was like, no, you need to do this. And it was just like literally him trying to like repeat the same thing over and over again. David Kim was just there smiling and nodding, and I was just dying and like in tears laughing. I was like, oh, this poor guy.
So that's what we call a selection pressure, where certain behaviors are encouraged, like, you know, building up a wall against certain points of feedback. I think the big thing is we just have to set up a dialogue with the community, regardless of skill level, and just go, okay, what's important to you? What do you need to be happy, productive, and prosperous in this community? And listen, take it into consideration, and when there's problems, involve the people with that domain expertise and that stake, right? You involve stakeholders, because we're trying to build something that benefits everyone, not only in the short term, but in the long term.
Yeah, you get amazing people like Beastie Cutie, who are, you know, very, very excellent people as soon as you start talking about balance and game design, because they come at it from a game design perspective instead of I need to win with my chosen race perspective, where they're like, well, it wouldn't be fair for this faction, or if we do push this faction that way, then the other faction needs something to counterbalance it, right? Like, those are the people who are like able to like be more analytical, where the people who are just hypercritical and just, you know, upset, right, and are coming from more of an emotional place where it feels to play against a certain faction, or they feel like their tools aren't enough, or that someone else's tools are too oppressive, that then you need to, you know, make sure that you understand the psychological perspective, but you're coming out from it from a more analytical side of things once you do get that feedback.
Well, you guys are just way too nice. I wanted to hear some ragging on terrible feedback you've got. You guys just like, no, we've got this organized system. We take feedback in this way. We know what to encourage, what to take with a grain of salt. It's like, oh, okay, all right. Just a bunch of highly
It's important to
motivated,
have that
functional
feedback,
people.
Yeah, so I think the key thing is just like also when you do get bad feedback or like low value feedback that you can't do a lot with, it's important to like point it out in a way that's very respectful and going like, so we can't do anything with this feedback for these reasons. And if you want to help us out and you want to make sure that your concern is registered with us and have a dialogue, these are the ways of doing that. And you don't just like unless someone really tries to say, hey guys, I'm an asshole and I'm gunning for you, you just assume that they're coming from a good place. Or even if they're kind of hostile, you're assuming that they're upset about a reasonable thing. And so you just try to find out what it is, and you do so with respect and good faith, and usually people will reciprocate that because people are decent, like people are good more often than not. So yeah, pretty standard stuff. And it takes a little, like, yes, you need thick skin. Yeah, you need to be brave. But those are skill sets that most people are capable of. And there are worse things in the world than having someone be angry at you on the internet.
I think a lot of people need to hear that last sentence there.
Yep, a lot of people in various communities. And
yeah,
I think
it's so tough because it gets a hold of you, man. That one negative comment and a pile of positive comments, and like building up that skin can be difficult. And it's been awesome to personally go through the content creator experience and then to come into Sunspear and to develop and learn all these communication tools that just make that part of the process just so much easier.
Yep. Not getting kept awake, hopefully, by the single message, you are fat or something in the midst of this was a great video. This looks great. You're like, but that
Thanks,
one
I learned
guy,
a ton.
That one guy said I was fat. Oh, it's only, it's that negativity bias. But yeah, you guys seem very centered about it. And I love it because you guys are so mired in the community and you've been discussing and outsourcing, brainstorming and thinking in your own groups and in your different communities for such a long time. So there have been a few different questions kind of popping up throughout, and I'm going to start kind of going through a few of those as we do. First of all, something that popped up was a question which I've seen a few people kind of mentioning across the forums and so on. So I was like, oh, we should really answer that. So Hedgie in chat was just saying, oh, this Kickstarter seems too low to develop a game. I think it would cost more than that to make a good RTS. And that's a common misconception. I think a lot of people were shocked when you guys announced just how big the current team is. So can you guys explain the backing of the team and what the Kickstarter is about? And is that the entire budget?
No.
I can. No, that's... Yeah, Dylan, you can go ahead.
Yeah, cool. I'm sorry, I'm just running biz dev stuff, like running support for biz dev these days, so along with Tom. So we're in what we're called like a seed 3 round. I won't get into the legalese and the fundraising strategy of it, but long story short, like we've raised well over $1 million, and we've been very scrappy with that. I mean, $1 million, $1.5 million out of a much larger budget because we are building a AAA game. I think the key thing is our team is incredibly scrappy. We are over half of the team comes from one modding community or another. And the priority there is not to get a fancy Tesla and to have a nice home in the burbs or in a nice city. It's to make a fucking awesome video game. And that has always been the priority. And we have literally like, we've endured things that frankly, a lot of startups just aren't willing to do to get where we are today. Because that's what it required. Because like we don't have the same pedigree as other startups necessarily, or we have a different pedigree, and that just necessitates that we have to put our our money where our mouth is and make something that shows that expertise. And I think we're getting there. We're in the process of securing another major round of funding. I can't say literally anything about that. It's all very hush hush. But our principal investor, this was announced, I think, at the beginning of the Kickstarter or shortly before, is one of the owners of Team Liquid. His name's Victor Goosen. He's Liquid Nazgul, he's a big guy in the esports scene. Maybe you heard of him. But like, and you know, like he's just another team member. Like, I will always remember exactly where I was. I was in Kevin's, our CEO Kevin's living room. Had butterflies in my stomach because holy shit, like we literally all met on teamliquid.net. Like it is a sacred place in my mind. It is like where the first, like, I think truly intellectual conversations about what RTS could and should be, like, came up with. Like it is the first, it's like the I don't know, it's like the forums of like ancient Athens or something. It's a place where the minds like met. And we talked for half an hour about the SFX design of like the Lurker and the Carrier and the Brood War Zergling, and how like simple iconic sounds are much better for an esport experience. And it just clicked. So the key thing for us, yes, like you can't build a game of this scale for 30 something, like it's literally elite. That was the meme for our Kickstarter goal. What the Kickstarter is there for is to do a few things. One, raise awareness about we are, what our values are, and what game we're trying to build. And two, to give people in the community who aren't accredited investors with the SEC legitimate representation and give them a voice in the community that we're building. And three, to show to prospective funding partners and people that we want to bring into our space as strategic allies that no, there is demand, there's passion, and there's excellence for this product, and that we are going to be building this thing together. Those are the three, like, and we want to just get that out and going to just show that momentum and show that passion as quickly as possible.
That's awesome. So, and I believe you guys said you have like 32 employees right now, roughly.
Yep.
So it's a big team. There's a lot of minds, brains, people working together, designing, coding, art, all sorts of stuff coming together. So, yeah, this is but a fraction. You guys are my lovely representatives today. And just because a few people, were like, hey, oh, that seems a bit small. Yeah, and I love this because I think this is a great way to get the community involved, give people a way to get that early access, get involved as essentially a playtester. If you are in the alpha, that's what you're doing is, you're helping give feedback and that sort of stuff. So get in there. You guys have already been putting the in-game items in, the lovely banners, which I am very excited to have Piggy Smalls potentially at the entrance to my base. That's going to be awesome. And I've already had a few people tweet at me, say, oh yeah, I got that one. And there's a whole lot of different content creators. I believe Huck had the love heart with the probe, right?
Yep.
You've got, like, that's a piece of Starcraft history there from 2011. It would always be doing a patrol or a move commanded love heart with his probes rally point. And, you've got all these different streamers and content creators across the RTS scene and streaming communities who are all represented with that. So it's really cool to see you guys get in on that. And you guys okay to hop into some of these questions from some of the audience? Was there any other topics you guys wanted to cover?
Hell yeah. Let's go.
All right. Do you guys have any plans for custom games and maps to be a part of your RTS? What would be the extent of creative freedoms for the map makers?
We want a full editor, and it's very complicated because we are in Unreal. And yeah, so we're going to start off targeting a terrain editor, because map making community maps are the heart of any like healthy, happy RTS esport. And if you don't have it, it makes a big difference, and the experience is a lot poorer, because it turns out that if you spend a lot of time working with maps, you're going to be better at it than someone who doesn't as much, because they have other responsibilities. So one thing, our Vanguard maps were made in conjunction with Kantuva, who's one of the best SC2 map makers in the whole scene. He's a great guy, and we're looking forward to working with him going forward. But we also want to provide a cohesive and intuitive tool that lets map makers, unleash their creativity and make the optimal experiences, because ultimately they're going to know more than us. Beyond that, for custom game scenarios, we absolutely want to keep expanding that sort of repertoire and that toolbox, but there's a lot of things that we can't commit to because of either potentially legal questions or problems that would have to get resolved, or just the major logistics
Technical
of building it.
limitations.
Yeah, technical
Getting
limitations
around
is
those.
frankly the big bugbear.
Yeah,
So
delivering a map editor just for making just okay, you play versus people in the standard mode, and a custom map. That's probably like the soonest goal that we can get to technically. And then the scarier part that'll take more time, right? Obviously, the bigger the game we get to be, the easier and easier it's going to be to accomplish this goal faster. Is to that goal of like having like custom mods, right? And being able to script things, right? Right now, that's pretty complicated because we're in UE4 engine. If I just hand you our code base, right, then all of a sudden that's just a giant risk, and you could run whatever code you wanted, right, using UE4. So yeah, we got to get past that beginning stage of just hey, we got to build the game first, and hopefully get a map maker, just a pure map maker tool for people first, and then we'll get down to that and be able to tackle that big goal later down the line. But for now, it's incredibly awesome to work in UE4 engine because you don't have to build your own engine, you don't have to build your own rendering pipeline. It is a giant force multiplier for a team as small as us, where AAA RTSs are made with much bigger teams, a lot more time, a lot more money. So hopefully we get there.
Yep, getting
nice.
getting the map makers involved. That's such a deep talent pool. As you said, Cantuva, is a name from so many ladder maps and different great community made maps over the years, and a bunch of other map makers out there who are very talented. So I think this next question is for JaKaTaK, most likely. This is from Orange. Says, what kind of coaching tools have you or will you be putting into the game? For instance, playing a game midway through a replay, like a recover sort of thing, or an Archon mode.
Yes, and other things. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that is going to change from the experience of learning and improving in StarCraft 2 to learning and improving in Immortal is that, again, we're an open system. So because we're an open system, as a company, we're financially incentivized to not just make an expansion pack that adds units, but also to add UX features, and not just when an expansion comes out, but all the time. And so the systems that are being set up are going to be changing. We're going to get pro feedback. We're going to have, things like micro tournament. We're going to have things like small little micro scenarios that actually happen at a regular, interval in the game that are going to be useful for you to learn. I'll give you an example. So the second tutorial mission, which if you're good should only take about 5 seconds to do, is you will be, when I say bite size, I mean bite size. You're
just really fucking good at your job.
onto a field. Thank you. You will be put onto a field, and at this point you know nothing except how to move your camera and how to cast immortal spells, which is the first tutorial. You will be placed on a battlefield. You will see your army, and you'll see the enemy's army. And your army is going to be fucking huge, and their army is going to be tiny. And the guy is going to say, do you want to attack or retreat? And you're going to attack. And that's going to teach you, one, you're going to press D. That's your default control group. That's your select all army hotkey, but it's smarter because it doesn't include units that are in control groups. Really easy fix. Then you're going to learn how to attack move. And next, it's going to be you're a tiny army, they're a giant army. Great. You know what to do. It's time to retreat. So you're going to learn how to right-click move command. And then, over time, the scenarios are going to get closer and closer and closer and more and more difficult to tell who's going to win and who's going to lose. And so this teaches you attack move command, how to select your army, and it also teaches you the eternal skill of how to pick a fight. You need to know if this is a good fight to pick or not. And if you play a game, maybe you get 3 opportunities to see if it's a good fight to pick. And if you're playing a game as lethal as StarCraft 2, if you lose that fight too hard, you're probably going to lose the whole game. And so this allows people to focus in and develop this really, really core skill very early on. But they can move on immediately. You can do the first attack, first retreat. Yep, I know. I'm just going to play the game to figure it out. great. Or you're that player that really likes to get in the lab and try it out, really, get the every edge of efficiency out. You can do that too. And so just imagine dozens and dozens of those. Some that already exist that you've heard of, and some that don't.
Hells to the yeah. That's it. This is why people should be excited that Jack's there. Some great ideas there for teaching those things, which I don't even think about as well myself. I'm like, I've got to rewind back to those beginning days. I was like 8 years old when I learned how to attack move. I don't even remember that. So I love that you've made such a study of all these and you're so methodical about it. It's awesome. We have a question from Ryan. Ryan, quotation marks, Ryan, who's okay.
Good choice for your ID.
We do love Ryan. Ryan got from silver to GM in less than a year. So he's a player who got very good at Starcraft. Very good.
Ooh.
Very, very quickly. Took down a few pro gamers in some online series and so on. So he says, is there a world where a lot of the easing of mechanics like auto worker production and so on be on... Okay, sorry, a bit of a typo. Like auto worker production and so on be turned on in unranked, but disabled for ranked gameplay? This question comes from me because I enjoy the macro mechanics of StarCraft 2, such as building supply depots, worker production, or so on. I really enjoyed learning and getting better at it, and I fear this aspect of skill expression will be heavily diminished to more unit movement and micro-focus game, which I think he's a few typos in. I think he's done this on his phone. Personally, I'm not as interested in, I think is what he's saying. He prefers the macro focus.
That's a regular
feels a bit afraid
from a certain section of the community. I mean, we can talk about opt-in complexity a lot here, but I think it's up to Tom or Travis for one of you guys to take this.
So like, if we ever we get to a point of the game where, okay, you have like every single top level bracket masters player like are just winning or losing because they've like kited back a stalker, right? Like we've got a problem. But like until then, we're definitely in a game where we're a faster pace of game. So it's not like you're playing StarCraft 2, right? Which you spend your first 5 minutes just building up, right? It's not like StarCraft 2. You've got more tasks to do, right? In the shorter time frame, right? In StarCraft 2, right, you've got this longer period of getting to the actual core experience of the game. Where in our game, you get your first production structure up and pumping out troops really quickly, right? You start making decisions to build tech or not, right? Really quickly. You will upgrade the economy of your town halls that you expand to, right? Like the pace of the game is actually increased to make sure it still retains that feeling of like, all right, I'm building my Sim City, and then I'm getting out of the map, and I'm doing both of those elements at the same time, right? So definitely, we've got that less of a feel where there's all these nitty gritty tiny decisions. Okay, worker here, worker, and then every 12 seconds I do my next round of Marines, right? So we definitely have jump started you to a faster pace of game. So we have that. And then it remains to be seen. Like if we get to the top level and it's just ultra figured out and too stale and shallow at the very top level and like we do need to just add more complexity. Like we should just do it, right? That's the only thing you can do. But until then, I would be very skeptical if we ever need to do that because people are so far beyond the human potential of how well they can just maintain being able to fight and macro at the same time and expand and do all these other tasks at the same time.
Yeah, and
I think that a good way of putting it is like when you see literally Korean A-listers floating alloy and ether, like because their APM, like their attention is too stretched because they're managing all these different.
You're managing
things
a 20-second, 25-second fight that you got to really pay attention to, right?
Yeah, and
I think it's there.
It is a different focus. It is going to be more tactics, more micro, more, but you do still have the pressure for the map control, and there are still the same core decisions with how you manage that economy. So someone who was a big Company of Heroes fan, especially the original game, it's a very simple economy. You just capture your points. You're incentivized to fight over those points, but it's all your tactics, right? And your micro and kind of getting out there and positioning your units. But there's more decisions in terms of, do you upgrade your base to get more workers on that base, right? You're going to have a bit of a more, I think, complicated tech tree, more complicated unit micro interaction. So I think sometimes people think if we take away that macro element, the game will just simplify and dumb down. But from my impression, we're seeing more and more of a focus on those unit interactions, right? And lots of moving and shooting units, lots of units kiting and interacting and trying to kind of interact with each other to gain territory, to backstab, to ambush. So there is going to be more micro, but I also think it's going to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's more drawn out. So someone who's coming with maybe only a cursory understanding of what Immortal is going to be, the fights aren't going to be anywhere near as lethal. The units aren't going to just bam. You're microing 3 fights at once,
banelings.
and one side just dies because you weren't looking for
Not
2
with that
seconds.
attitude.
Yeah, because it's easy to come from a StarCraft player's perspective and go, and then I'm just gonna get stormed on one side because I'm not looking, and then my Banes might hit something, but it's gonna be too stressful. But I think it's going to be a more drawn out level of combat. And anyone who's played a bit more Brood War, I think, is going to be a little bit more understanding of this. Anyone who's gone and played Vanguard or Starbow, where the fights are slower to progress, and you can actually jump between them without being as frantic. You can manage multiple areas a little bit better. So it's just going to give you even more chance to focus on those things because the macro mechanics are simplified, right?
Yeah, and it scales up. Like, it is easier to transition to a macro game, right? It's a lot harder to die to super lethal samurai cuts that, StarCraft 2 and Brood War is notorious for. Especially low-level Brood War is just death blow after death blow because you were, up by 5 Zerglings.
The SCV didn't move! You made me repairing the bunker!
While repairing, oh no!
Not like this.
Man.
You gotta survive in Brood War to actually play the
rage.
macro game. Otherwise, you never get to experience anything like it.
Yeah, I tried to play a tiny bit of Terran in Brood War as someone who doesn't have a background in it at all, and I was like, oh, this is just impossible. Like, this race is the most ridiculous thing I've ever put my hands on. I was just like, what is going on? I'm just getting killed by the first Zealot and Dragoon, the first Zerglings. My Warlofts always have holes in them, and it was just an absolute disaster.
It's brutal. They had 10 more Zerglings than me in ZVZ. Guess I die.
Yep.
Yeah, so to I guess to give you a feeling of what it's like to play, like, so far we haven't really had people like pros will played Vanguard, right? And they don't come back telling us, man, it just feels terrible that there's this lack of macro, right? Like, we just didn't get that feedback. So it's never been a concern whenever pro level players who are used to having all that nitty gritty control come back and tell me they're really enjoying the game and enjoying these really large epic scale fights, right?
Yeah.
So until we get enough feedback, I guess it's just not a concern yet.
And the thing is, there is still a lot of depth. When do you expand? How fast do you expand? What units do you choose?
Build orders and tech timings, like timing attacks, cheeses, all of that is there. All of that exists. And you can just end someone in Immortal. Yes, it is harder. Sometimes it requires a bit of follow through or a bit of coordination if you're playing 2v2. But all that architecture, all that like deep complexity and like exacting like demand of skills is all there. The difference is, because of Tom's hard work and Travis's hard work and Coulter's hard work, is that new players and low skill players don't start at absolute rock bottom 0 and get thrown into a dumpster and set on fire for 3 weeks. Like, that's the difference. And yes, that does like make the skill floor less apparent, because players do show up with an army like to the battlefield more often than not. But like, I would challenge basically the notion that players should basically not be given any like meaningful handrails when getting into the game, because how engaging or rewarding or skill testing is a game when someone shows up to the battlefield with like 3 or 4 units because they don't know how macro works, versus someone who's been macroing on like 3 bases and has 80 Zerglings. Like, what does that actually
And
yield?
that
To the
tends to
game?
be low level players versus low level players. It's less about can they at some point build a big army, right? Like you give any low level player, they can build a big army. The question is when you have one level player who is just a little bit worse than another guy, and one of them just decided to macro and actually focus on it and build an army, maybe like a minute earlier than the other person, and all of a sudden it's 60 stalkers versus 5. So yeah, handling that part of how lopsided it is in StarCraft 2 about how important macro is to any person winning it, all the way up to plat, you just macro better and all of a sudden you're a diamond, right? Tackling that part of the game while still maintaining that top end, that is the critical goal that made us go, all right, we can build this game. Let's do it.
Well, and something to add in here too is like there's an idea that like fights are in micro is hard, so players will not be drawn. Players don't want to do it; they'll be afraid of it. And what I did to try and figure out what the heck was wrong at the low level of RTS is I went into Bronze League to all the people who don't go on YouTube forums, who don't go on Reddit, who don't go on Team Liquid, who don't give feedback and don't talk, and I lost games against them. And I said, "Great job for beating me. You're awesome. But tell me about what you like about this game." And I just talked to them, and I did that hundreds of times. And you know what they wanted to do? They wanted to fight with their armies. They wanted to make armies, and they wanted to do stuff with them. They didn't want to. They were so frustrated that they had to do all of these things to get to the point, to get to this promise of I get to make a cool army and fight with it. And so I had to tell them, "Hey, do you want to win? I've got this thing called the staircase. You're going to throw out strategy until you beat 80% of the players in the game, and then strategy will be relevant to you. It's not great, but it works if your goal is to win."
Yeah.
And that's just like, that's so sad. Like I don't want to make a game where people are like, "Oh, hey, that thing that you want to do, ignore that for a while. Then you get to do it later when you deserve it." It's like,
It's so sad.
No.
It's not
Yeah,
not a great
about
on
making
ramp. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, and it's mostly just about making good on the promise that your game is making, right? Like in a game like Dota 2 or League of Legends, the promise is very upfront. You're going to pick a heroic character and you're going to beat the crap out of other characters in a battle arena, and using your character's like hallmark skills and engaging with that character's like power fantasy, whether that's like Hecarim or Jace or whatever. So, or Tide Hunter or whatever. Like the key thing is, and you can be absolutely god awful at that game and get stomped, but at least you're using your abilities, and at least you're like going into the lane and you're killing minions and you're farming. Like you at least get that base experience before you lose, and you might not understand exactly why you lost, but you can see the bad guy coming at you, and then you see the skill shot land, and then you see your HP go, and then you have a gray screen. Like that doesn't happen consistently in classic RTS design because there are all these like barriers to accessing that core experience. And so what we're just doing is we're polishing the on ramp, and we're kind of flipping the script where it's like, do you want to optimize your build orders to like the micrometer? Because you can absolutely do that. You just will get an advantage over players where that actually matters, versus against players that you'll be able to beat just by coming up with like more stuff in a game like StarCraft 2 or Brood War.
Yeah. And to give you an example of where like the better player you're fighting, the more you get stretched out, right? Because we try to balloon the game out to make up room for that so that it becomes harder to macro, the better the player you're fighting against, right? Because if I'm playing against, any of the random devs on our team, I'm one of the best players on our team, and it's just easy. I'm just gonna macro perfectly, no problem, no sweat, and I'll go harass at the same time. But then I fight BC Cutie in Vanguard, and I would be floating 3K because I'm trying to stay alive in a fight while getting harassed in 2 different locations. I'm like, oh god, Jesus Christ! And then all of a sudden,
Yep.
I've actually slipped up, and I'm like, oh no, I need more stuff. God damn it. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's the feeling that we're trying to make sure is still in place when these titans are trying to stretch each other to the maximum and are having to make the decision of, Do I focus on fighting? Do I focus on multitasking? Right? What am I doing with my time?
Yeah, am I focusing on reinforcing and expanding
Yeah.
my economy? Like that magic is still there.
Yeah.
The
I think we
common
really
misconception
harness-
is that this will you are going to remove, it's going to affect the skill ceiling, and it's not going to be as competitive. It's going to be like a card game where you can just get lucky and beat the other person. But someone was saying, oh, so like a GM always beats a Masters in StarCraft 2, almost always. So is that not going to be the case? It's going to be like way closer because in this game there's not as someone was asking that before, and you guys said in the Pylon Show episode, no, if there's a 0.1% skill difference, we want the person with that skill difference. They're going to win almost always. Like that you guys are very, very adamant about that point because you do all come from a competitive background, and you really you guys are going to get so sick of this by the time the game is fully released because you're going to have to say it so many times, and you already have, where it's like, no, it's not they're independent. They're these are things that can be separate. You guys can change those problem points and also not mess up the skill ceiling at the same time. So let's get
our semi-pros who play this game all the time will still get beat by pros who come into this game and play it for the first couple matches, and they're like, I get it, and they just dominate because they're just better at RTSs.
Absolutely. But you still get the core experience. People are talking about MOBAs. You get into it a little bit easier and you get a bit more of the core experience because there's a lane and there's a tower and you go there. You're playing Counter-Strike, you still get to shoot your gun, even though you're aiming for the crotch rather than the head. You still get the rough experience as a beginner. It doesn't really matter. Whereas
Counter-Strike's brutal.
Yeah,
I need to come in here with a user experience story because this is kind of the moment when we were like testing out various like UI setups for army control and democratizing so in Brood War, right, like it's a Herculean effort to get High Templar and Psionic Storms in your composition before 10 minutes. And to watch in Vanguard mod, like the moment that it clicked, where I saw people in Silver League building High Templar, because this is Vanguard, and then pairing it with another spellcaster and using both abilities in a fight and going like, oh my god, not only do they have an army, but they're actually able to like participate in the abilities like that their faction is like advertising. Like, so you look at Legacy of the Void and you see, all these badass warriors like doing cool stuff in the screen or in the cinematic. And like we actually like have created an experience where players who are not very good at this game can actually get into it. And yeah, like their storm placement is crap. And like there's all these areas of improvement, but they get that feedback and they go, oh, I could do that better next time. That's a person who's going to be in the community for a longer period of time. That's a person who's now invested in getting better. That is a person who's now been evangelized by the beauty and sort of that fantastic like magic that RTS has to offer. Instead of going, well, I guess this game I'm just not good enough for this game. I'll just play like a normie game and have my fun that way. Like that's a gained opportunity, not a lost one.
Heck yeah. I think this is all great stuff, and there's so much knowledge and wisdom here, but I don't want to keep you guys too long, so I do want to start wrapping up the show now and getting towards the very end. So I'm just going to skim these questions. Great question from Porninate. They say they really like race-specific building mechanics, creep spread, power fields, that sort of stuff. Are you guys having that for your different factions, or is bases basically going to be the same?
Millions. Like, yeah, we get to do some crazy stuff.
Yeah, so like we can talk about Croth and ARU. Croth has hallowed ground. So if you've seen any of the gameplay, a lot of their buildings and some units have this giant holy ring around them. That's this fiery blue angel fire, and their basic unit, the Sapari, his shield starts glowing. He's infused by hallowed ground, and he gets a bit faster and has a little bit more shields. And so you springboard them off of hallowed ground. Then we have the dervish, who has a teleport ability. When they teleport anywhere that's not on hallowed ground, it costs a little bit of shields to do it. But when they teleport into hallowed ground, they start recharging their shields pretty rapidly. So it becomes a really powerful defensive tool. And then every other unit they have has this small little buff that's not as important to know about, but is like, this cute little mechanic that the high level players will nerd out about. It'll be you don't really need to know about it as a low level player, that hallowed ground gives. And then of course you need to be building your buildings on top of held ground, depending on the building. Some of them are generators, some of them need to be placed there. And then the ARU have something called a rootway. The rootway gives increased mana regeneration for their troops, and basically lets their the ARU also have like a shallow shield pull for almost all their units.
Oh, this is such a cool
And
mechanic.
they're, instead of like the Croft is more like a Brood War Protoss style shield where they slowly recharge over time, but constantly. The ARU is more like StarCraft 2 Protoss shields where it's very fast, but instead of it being like half their life pool, they have like 1/5 of their life pool as this very quick to recharge pull. And
Yeah, it's overgrowth.
you pull them out of combat, and 3 seconds later, they've got their shield back. So it encourages them to be even more optimizing with their very fast hit and run type units.
They're cool.
so,
They've got
like,
that
so
Call of Duty metabolism. I like that. They just
Yeah.
I didn't get shot
So-
for 2
yeah,
seconds.
so-
My wounds have healed. Awesome.
Yeah. They've got that tiny bit of extra buffer. They can recharge really quickly and super optimize in fights if they want to. So that's ARU specific. So they have slower mana regeneration than everybody else as sort of like a cost to being able to cast from blood, their life pool. But if you want to get your full normal, your normal mana regeneration, you want to bring them back on a rootway and get those nutrients from the rootway. So they get that bonus shield regen speed and that full mana regeneration despite having cast from blood. So they have those two little perks on their system. And then certain units do have a buff on the rootway, like
the Resonant has bonus range, I think.
Yeah, the Resonant is kind of like a siege tank kind of unit. It'll get bonus range while in rootway. So if you pop some rootway somewhere, and you set up your underspines, all these defensive tools, and you get this TVT style gridlock
Slow
area
push.
that you start nailing down, you start siege pushing with it, right? Then having rootway there is all of a sudden giving your zone control units extra range, right? So those are 2 examples. We have a lot more unique mechanics. Like we definitely want to have like a command and conquer type build grid in the future for one faction, which will be cool. We can't talk too much about yet. But yeah, we definitely love all the asymmetrical ways of playing SimCity. We want to be more creative and more zany with the ways we do it instead of playing a little bit safe like we are with Croft. But we definitely want to go forward with crazy ideas.
Heck yeah. I mean, so many different plans and excitements there around how that's going to happen. And there was a bunch of other questions from people, but I don't think we really have time to go through them all. Some of them have already been answered, I think, through the course of the discussion, a lot of the questions. So if you guys didn't get your question answered, you're watching the show, well, this is the perfect time to actually make sure you get on your social media, whether you're on Twitter, YouTube, wherever you are. We've got Sunspirit Games on Twitter. We also have, I believe it is, what's the Twitter handle again? I think it's
Gates of Pyre.
Gates of Pyre.
But for real, guys, if you really want to just talk with us and ask us questions and get into a dialogue, just join our Discord server. We're really active there. We're always happy to have a conversation. And, for really insightful questions, we're happy to pin them or add them to frequently asked questions. So join.
Yep. Yeah, the Discord is a community hub. That's where most of the people are. We do work on other social media. We're working on expanding our Twitter and Reddit and discussions. We sometimes post on Team Liquid, but it's really all about the Discord. We have, you're gonna love these guys. We have the most just wonderfully respectful and welcoming folks. Just like everybody, someone comes in, there's always someone to welcome you at the door and ask you what your favorite RTS is and get you in a conversation and say, hey, you should introduce yourself and stuff like that. Shout out to, we got a lot of people in the chat, but you want to talk about build orders. Zardasil in there has done literal calculus to optimize his build orders and understand exchange rates between units and economic damage. Like,
And I
the
can't
lad
wait
is
to update
amazing.
it and break them all.
Yep, he's gonna do it again.
He's going to do it again. It's an arms race.
Yeah. Shout out to all our harbingers out there. We really appreciate you guys.
Oh my god, that's so sick. Yeah, we've got Cobra Venom has been an absolute beast, dropping the Discord links in the chat all throughout. So everybody do get on in there, joining the discussion and become part of the community. Check out the Kickstarter, whether or not you can afford to support it right now, everybody, but definitely do consider getting on those beautiful alpha access tiers and
Especially those sweet add-ons.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
if only there was a particular community member that you would like to support.
If only,
Yeah.
if only you all
only
could,
there was.
yeah. I mean, get yourself some lovely little banners of, and there's so many different community people out there that you guys can pick to get that banner, the pennant, the battle cry there. I mean, as you guys evolve it, I am going to demand when you do, a release at some point that you have a standard bearer skin where you can stick this on the back of a unit in your army, and and if he
That's a hot
dies, all your units
Well-
lose morale, start running away. It's just
Yeah.
like it's
Great.
So,
Here's my
something
favorite thing about
cool.
ideas like that, right? Like, we can probably do that in PvE, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can do
In
we can do some
PvP,
crazy stuff in PvE.
Whenever you
Oh,
use
no.
a spell using your commander shows up on the battlefield temporarily and casts the spell there. So you can kit out what your commander looks like. You could totally get a banner on him and see him every time you cast a spell and buff up your troops or throw down a cool pillar or something, right? Then you see your commander hit the field and he's like, I've got this cool flag with teddy bear on it. What's up?
Hi-oh. That would be awesome. Well, it's awesome to see all of these updates and everything. I am sure I've missed 1,000 different questions. So get in the Discord and ask them yourselves, everybody. That's it. Don't complain to me. I've missed so many good questions because we have too much to talk about. But thank you for
It's
rehashing.
in fact a big subject.
Yeah. Well, thank you for rehashing some of the stuff I already heard you talk about in detail for the Pylon show with Artosis. That was such an enlightening discussion. So I appreciate you guys going over some of that stuff, as well as dropping some new knowledge, some new information, analogies, and getting to show off some cool new stuff. Because honestly, I'm just saying, corrupted, tree, blood, god worshipping, psychopath, awesome races out on brutal planets where it's hard to survive. This gets me excited. The ARU look really damn cool. I already saw a few people in chat saying, oh, I've already picked my race now, haven't I? But I'm hoping with each future announcement, maybe we get even more excited and more freaked out. So keep up the great work, guys. Are there any last shout outs or anything like that which you guys would like to make, or any last words or topics you'd like to cover?
Yeah, thanks for being such a positive force in the community. I think right now RTS is going through a pretty tumultuous period, and it's been going on for a while. And so having people who are not only like forces for like reason and like calm reflection, but also just forces for optimism, like it's just really good. So like keep doing you, man. Like you guys are awesome.
Thank you so much, and keep putting the passion in. You guys have been through a lot. You've made a lot of sacrifices, and you guys have all made this happen. I think there's already quite a few naysayers who are going, oh, we didn't think it would make it this far. Damn, awesome. And to see it evolving as quickly as it is now is very exciting. So absolutely love it when I see people chase their passion and go out and put themselves out there for, such a dicey endeavor as making a game, making an RTS that goes and completely changes all of the assumptions about what an RTS has to be, which is copy one of the old successful ones, remake it with one or two small details or a reskin. This is changing a lot. So you guys are blending different genres together here, different gameplay mechanics, new onboarding, as you guys have said, new ways of designing. And I'm sure at some point in the future, I want to have you guys back. So hopefully maybe a few months down the line when there's new content or something like that, I'd love to have you guys back on. And if there's anyone else who has different perspectives from within the team to share, maybe we can get someone else from within Sunspear as well. But it's a pleasure having you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Man.
It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye and good night.
Later, Tater. Garrett, thank you so much. That's awesome. Sorry,
Girls with the nails done.